Part 53. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 521. Lin Xian was amused. You are not afraid, I am a man, naturally I have nothing to be afraid of, if you want to stay, then stay. Shen Shuwei was happy to hear that. She put the medicine box back on the table, and bolted the door. Lin Xian looked at her actions indifferently, and was not annoyed by her initiative to stay overnight. Although she spent most of her time eating and sleeping, she would not make people feel boring, but felt that it would be nice if he had such a lovely wife. Shen Shuwei bolted the door and walked over with brisk steps. Sharing a bed with Xiao Jinyan was a very common thing for her, and she did not feel awkward because he did not remember. On the contrary, Lin Xian was a little uncomfortable. When Shen Shuwei lay beside him in slippers, Lin Xian could not ignore that he would be sleeping with a woman tonight. After Shen Shuwei got on the bed, she lay beside him naturally. She looked at the man sitting there sideways and patted him with a smile. Aren't you sleepy? Of course I'm sleepy, Lin Xian said and lay down, keeping 2 arms distance from her. The bed was not as big as the one in the East Palace, but it was not small either. It was more than enough for 2 people to lie down. Shen Shuwei, who was used to sleeping on a soft bed, was not used to it for the first few nights. She would have backaches in the morning, but now she is used to it. Shen Shuwei stared at the man for a long time. After he forgot her, he was a little different from before. It might be because there was another person's memory in his mind, so the way of speaking and expression would be a little different. Before he lost his memory, Xiao Jinyan was calm and would never neglect etiquette at any time, except in bed. Now Xiao Jinyan is a bit like a fox. Lin Xian always felt that there was a gaze staring at him with his eyes closed. There was no cover, which made people unable to ignore it. How could he sleep? He had to open his eyes and look over, and then he met a pair of sparkling star eyes. Don't you want to sleep? Sleep. Shen Shuwei was actually sleepy a long time ago. There were no entertainment programs in ancient times, not even mobile phones, so she was used to going to bed early. Seeing her close her eyes, Lin Xian retracted his gaze and closed his eyes to continue sleeping. At first, Shen Shuwei saw a black figure when she came here, and thought of the masked man, and was a little worried whether he came to kill Xiao Jinyan. But in the end, she couldn't hold on any longer and fell into a deep sleep. Although Lin Xian closed his eyes, he didn't fall asleep. The woman lying beside him couldn't be ignored the more he wanted to ignore her. In summer, although the windows were open for ventilation, it was still a little hot, and the faint fragrance always surrounded his nose, wantonly invading his senses. He tried hard to ignore this feeling, but at this time he remembered the painting, and he remembered the person in the painting very clearly. Shen Shuwei in the painting had a bit more feminine charm, with a rosy face and a slender waist that could be grasped. Just thinking about it for a while, Lin Xian suddenly felt dry in the mouth. After Shen Shuwei fell asleep, she didn't follow the rules at the beginning, but began to find a comfortable posture, and it was inevitable that she would touch Lin Xian when she moved. Lin Xian, who was originally unable to sleep, was touched by her. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the person next to him. He saw that she hummed with her eyes closed. She used to sleep on her side, but now she was lying down, with her limbs spread out, 1 foot pressed on his leg, and 1 arm on his chest. The wound on his chest had scabbed over, so it wouldn't hurt if it was touched. He saw that the place where she slept took up almost half of the bed. Is this not taking up space? Shen Shuwei felt uncomfortable sleeping in this position, so she changed her position again, still lying on her side, but this time she hugged his arm in her arms. Shen Shuwei has always had a habit of sleeping, that is, she needs to hold something in her arms to sleep more peacefully. If there is a pillow, she will hold the pillow, or she will hold the quilt. When she shared a bed with Xiao Jinyan, she hugged his arm. With her arm held in her arms, He could clearly feel the softness in front of him. Lin Xian couldn't sleep at all at this time. He was a normal man, how could he bear it? He should have rejected her proposal to stay overnight, at least he wouldn't be tortured like this. He did not sleep well that night, and could only fall asleep reluctantly when it was almost dawn. The next day, when Shen Shuwei woke up, she saw a handsome face facing her. She lay on the bed, staring at the familiar face for a long time. Her eyes fell on his lips, and with a teasing mind, she stretched out her finger to poke it. Lin Xian had gone to bed in the early morning, and he was sleeping very deeply at this time. It was a little itchy when he was poked, but he just frowned slightly and had no intention of waking up. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan, who usually got up early, but he was sleeping so deeply at this time. Her eyes looked at Xiao Jinyan's neck, and the arc of his Adam's apple was a bit sexy. She poked his Adam's apple with her finger again. The Adam's apple rolled up and down, a shallow moan leaked from his lips and teeth. Seeing that he still showed no sign of waking up, Shen Shuwei simply leaned over to his ear and whispered, "Get up." Lin Xian was dreaming, and the scene in the dream was somewhat indescribable. He always felt that the dream was a little unreal. Shen Shuwei actually took the initiative to tease him and touch his Adam's apple. But he always got up early, and when he heard Shen Shuwei calling him to get up, he still forced himself to wake up from the dream. He opened his eyes with difficulty, and his narrow eyes narrowed into a slit. Then he slowly opened them and saw a delicate face. Used to sleeping alone, he suddenly saw a woman. He was stunned for a moment, and then he remembered that Shen Shuwei stayed overnight last night. Because he didn't sleep well, he had a headache. He rubbed his temples. "What are you doing?" Shen Shu smiled and said, "Calling you to get up." Lin Xian rubbed his temples for a while, sat up with his hands on the bed, raised his eyes and glanced out the window. It was already dark. At this time, he was already sitting in a wheelchair drinking tea. Shen Shuwei also sat up and stretched. She tilted her head and stared at him, and found that his eyes were dark blue. "Did you sleep well last night?" When Lin Xian thought about being tortured by her all night last night, and then looked at her innocent face, he said expressionlessly, "It's pretty good." Shen Shuwei asked, "Then why do you have dark circles?" Lin Xian's eyes paused when he heard this. Without a mirror, he didn't know if he had dark circles at this time. He raised his eyes and glanced at Shen Shuwei. Seeing that she was still looking at him with a puzzled expression, he coughed lightly and said, "Are you still making breakfast today? Let's do it. The food here is not as delicious as what I cook. For my mouth, I have to spend an hour and a half making the food." Shen Shuwei sighed after finishing speaking, "It would be great if Chengzi is here. She has obtained my true inheritance, and she will do whatever I want to eat." Lin Xian nodded when he heard this. "That's right. As a princess, there is no reason for you to cook in person. I'm getting up." Shen Shuwei got out of bed neatly, put on his shoes, and then walked out carrying the medicine box. Lin Xian sat there and watched Shen Shuwei disappear at the door. After thinking for a while, he lay back on the bed and went back to sleep. Shen Shuwei returned to her guest room, put down her medicine box and was about to get dressed and wash up when she saw a note on the table. She picked it up and took a look at it doubtfully. When she read the contents on the note, her hands shook in fear. The note said that you really didn't care about anything for him. Shen Shuwei subconsciously thought of the masked man. He was the only one who wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan. Could the dark figure she saw last night be the masked man? No wonder she was always restless, always feeling like something was going to happen. After she recovered from her fear, Shen Shuwei took the note and ran out. Bang! The door was pushed open forcefully. Lin Xian, who had fallen asleep, was awakened by a loud noise. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw a figure running towards him in a hurry. "Husband, what I felt last night was correct. Look." Shen Shuwei hurriedly handed the note in her hand to him. Lin Xian hadn't fully woken up yet. He hesitated for 2 seconds before taking the note from her hand and glancing at the words on it. His phoenix eyes narrowed slightly. Does he know you? Shen Shuwei shook his head vigorously. How could I possibly know such a perverted person? I don't know him. That night was also the first time I saw him. Lin Xian showed her the written side of the note, but it says between the lines, he knows you. I really don't know him. Shen Shuwei carefully recalled the masked man's behavior that night. Goosebumps rose and she shuddered. But his behavior was indeed weird, very much like a pervert. Lin Xian thought about that night. The masked man not only acted strangely, but also acted out of common sense. What did he say to you that night? Why did he take you away and let you go? Shen Chu blinked his beautiful big eyes twice and started to wonder, maybe it's because it's offensive to kill a weak woman like me, and I feel like I'm losing face, so you let me go. Lin Xian had been getting along with her for some time, and he knew this was a lie as soon as he heard it. I'm asking you about business, don't talk about things you don't want to do. Shen Shuwei couldn't tell her that she agreed to the masked man to jump off the building that night to save him. Husband, a perverted psychology is not something we ordinary people can understand. Whether perverts speak or behave, they do not act according to common sense. If it follows common sense, it is not perverted. Lin Xian keenly realized that she was deliberately changing the subject. How could a person who regarded human life as a piece of shit let him go because of the lives of multiple women? He pondered for a moment and asked, it has something to do with me, right? Shen Shuwei denied guiltily, no, I'm hungry. If you have anything to do, we'll talk about it later. I'll make breakfast first. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, he stood up and left. Before he could take a step, Lin Xian grabbed his wrist and pulled him back. She looked at him doubtfully, what to do? Lin Xian said one sentence at a time, do you think that the masked man wouldn't come to your door if you didn't tell me? Don't you wonder why the masked man let you back? And why did he leave you a note? Shen Chu thought for a while and guessed, maybe he wants to remind me. Lin Xian raised the note in his hand again and showed it to her, see for yourself, he is clearly saying that you don't care about yourself for me. If you don't know someone, why would he leave you such a note? Good afternoon. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 522. In fact, Lin Xian was already a little confused last time. Shen Shuwei, a ruthless person, tried to kill him again and again, but he remained indifferent. At that time, he ignored this point because of his worry. Shen Shuwei stared at the note for a long time. It is undeniable that what Xiao Jinyan said made sense, but she really didn't know this person. Seeing that Xiao Jinyan didn't believe her, she simply raised her hand, I swear, I really don't know him, if it's false. Lin Xian pressed down Shen Shuwei's hand as soon as she raised it, don't swear casually. Oh, Shen Shuwei didn't expect Xiao Jinyan to be so superstitious. Lin Xian said again, tell me what the masked man said to you that night. If you don't tell the truth, it's hard to know who the other person is. Under his repeated questioning, Shen Shuwei had to tell the truth, actually, it's nothing. It was him. He asked me to jump off the balcony. As long as I jumped, he would let you go temporarily. Lin Xian frowned, you jumped. Shen Shuwei said, I was forced to jump. If he gave me a second way, I wouldn't jump from such a high place. Lin Xian was stunned at first, thinking how could there be such a stupid woman who jumped off the balcony for him? At that height, without Qinggong, she would definitely die. But Shen Shuwei is fine now, something must have happened again. He asked, then what? Shen Shuwei said, after I jumped down, he followed and saved me. Before he left, he said, if you jump, you jump. Without you, will I die? Lin Xian frowned. A stranger will not say these words to you. Maybe he knows you, but you don't know him. Shen Shuwei thought that maybe the masked man knew the original owner, but the original owner didn't remember him. She nodded in agreement. My husband is right. Lin Xian saw that she was so obedient, and his voice was a little gentler. Even so, you should keep your distance from him. I understand that keeping a distance from perverts is to save your life. I'm going to make breakfast. After Shen Shuwei left, Lin Xian looked down at the note in his hand and fell into deep thought. At this time in the Daxia Palace, Susu woke up early in the morning and lay on the bed. She hadn't seen her mother for a long time, and she was a little unhappy. Dabai opened the door and walked in early in the morning. Seeing that the little ancestor had woken up, he walked to the bed with his strong limbs, put his chin on the bed, and stared at Susu with his light blue eyes without blinking, as if waiting for her to get up. Dabai already has the weight and height of an adult tiger, and can feel the momentum of the beast with every step. However, no matter how fierce Dabai is, in Susu's eyes, he is no different from Suichuan, her tiger, and her mount. Susu reached out and touched Dabai's nose, then climbed up, hugged Dabai's neck like a slide, and slid down from the back of Dabai's neck. Dabai looked at the little ancestor calmly until he stood up, then stood up and waited. Susu is almost 2 years old, and her walk is much more stable than before. She didn't wait for the maid to come in to dress up, but ran out with her 2 short legs. Dabai followed behind slowly, like a bodyguard. Susu followed her mother through the back door many times, so she remembered the way immediately. She came to the back door. There was almost no one guarding it because it was a secret door. Usually only Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shuwei went through this door. She held the door frame, lifted her short legs and walked in. After entering the prince's bedroom, she saw Xiao Qiuqiu from a distance, and she threw herself into Xiao Qiuqiu's arms and stretched out her hands to hug him. Xiao Qiuqiu, hug me. Chu Lingfeng looked down at Susu, who was much shorter than him. After being together for so long, the two had already become familiar with each other, so naturally he would not refuse to hug her. Susu was almost 2 years old, and he could still hug her. Susu hugged Xiao Qiuqiu's neck and said in a baby voice, Xiao Qiuqiu, look for mom. Chu Lingfeng said, Susu, the crown princess has gone to find the crown prince, and she is not in the palace now. Susu really missed her mother and father so much that when she was anxious, her voice was a little choked. She held Chu Lingfeng's face and said, little Qiuqiu, take your nest out to find it. This is Susu's way of pleasing her. When she wants to eat something delicious, she will hold Chengzi's face and kiss her fiercely. Chengzi holds the 2 little ancestors in her hands and pampers them. Every time she is kissed by Susu, her heart is melted, and she almost agrees to her requests. How can Chu Lingfeng have the right to leave the palace without permission? But seeing Susu's face that is about to cry, he can't bear it. Thinking about it, Chu Lingfeng took Susu to Fenji Palace. Dabai followed behind without saying a word. Chu Lingfeng glanced at Dabai behind him. If they hadn't been together every day, he would have been scared to death. Fenji Palace. As soon as the concubines in the harem paid their respects and left, the queen came down from the throne and slowly walked to the dining table to have breakfast. The maid walked in with small steps and bowed to report, Queen, the little princess and Prince Chu are here. As soon as the maid finished speaking, Chu Lingfeng walked in with Susu. The queen saw Susu, smiled and stood up to greet her, baby. Susu saw the queen mother and reached out to her, Nai. The queen held Susu in her arms. Seeing that Susu was still wearing her little clothes for sleeping, she knew that she had gotten up and came over. Chu Lingfeng stepped forward and saluted, I pay my respects to the queen mother. The queen glanced at Prince Chu, get up. Thank you, Queen. Chu Lingfeng stood up and looked up at Susu in the queen's arms, Queen, Susu misses the crown princess and his royal highness. Susu hugged the queen's neck and said with a look of crying, "Nana, I miss mommy and father." The queen felt so distressed when she saw Susu missing her mother. "Susu, mommy and father will be back soon." Susu tilted her head and looked at the queen's grandmother in confusion. "When is soon?" The queen was stumped by her precious granddaughter's question. She didn't know when soon was. "You were sent a letter a few days ago saying that everything was fine." The crown princess took Qin Xiao to find the crown prince brother, and there was already a clue. She didn't say it specifically, so she didn't know. The queen saw the food on the table and knew that Susu loved to eat, so she coaxed, "Baby, can you have breakfast with the queen?" Susu turned her head to look at the food on the table and clapped her hands happily. "Okay." Susu could eat independently a long time ago, and she ate cleaner than before, and didn't spill it everywhere. After Dabai came in, he lay sideways under Susu's dining chair. Although Dabai often followed Susu to Fenji Palace, the maids and servants were still afraid of Dabai and dared not approach him. Susu saw the meat buns, picked one up, and looked at Dabai sideways. Hoo. When Dabai heard the little ancestor calling him, he immediately raised his huge head, because he knew that the little ancestor was going to feed him, so he opened his mouth and waited. When Susu saw Dabai, he threw the meat bun in his hand into Dabai's mouth accurately. One meat bun was not enough for Dabai to fill his teeth, but Dabai ate happily. The queen looked at Dabai's open mouth and his strong body, and she couldn't help but feel scared. She followed Susu all day long. She was worried for several months and was still a little worried. But Susu was so good to Dabai that Dabai was indispensable whenever she ate meat. Of course, Dabai was also indispensable for the dishes she didn't like. For example, now, one meat bun is not enough for Susu, so she took a bite of the meat bun in one hand and took the meat bun with the other hand to feed Dabai again. After a while, more than half of the 2 trays of meat buns went into Dabai's stomach. Dabai licked his lips with satisfaction, indicating that a few more trays would not be a problem. Susu looked at the vegetables in front of him and picked up some with chopsticks. Hoo. Dabai raised his head and opened his mouth again, waiting to be fed. Susu picked up the vegetables and put them into Dabai's mouth, because she didn't like to eat vegetables, but liked to eat meat the most, but she couldn't waste it, so she had to give it to Dabai. Dabai was originally a meat eater, but after following Susu for more than a year, he became a vegetarian. The queen looked at the vegetables her precious granddaughter fed Dabai and shook her head helplessly. "Baby, you have to eat vegetables too, you can't give them all to Dabai." Susu said seriously, "Nana, I'm still a baby, wait for me to grow up and eat the cabbage." The queen was amused by what she said. Only the baby can be picky and give himself an excuse. Susu stood up with the help of the dining table, holding the table with one hand and holding the chopsticks with the other hand, picked up the vegetables and put them into the bowl of the queen. Then she said in a baby voice, "Nana, eat the cabbage, it's beautiful." The queen couldn't help laughing out loud, because she said this when she was coaxing her precious granddaughter to eat vegetables. Baby's mouth is like honey, so sweet. Susu was greedy when she heard honey. "Nana, after dinner, I want some candy." The queen smiled and nodded. "Okay, after breakfast, you can have one candy." Susu bent her fingers, then raised her fingers to show the queen grandmother. "Nana, I want 3. The queen asked in confusion, "Why 3? You can only eat one candy." Susu lowered her head and continued to bend her fingers. She bent her little finger. "This is for Kuakuo." Then she bent her ring finger. "This is for Xiao Kuakuo." Then Cai bent the last raised finger. "This is for Wo." The queen now understood that her precious granddaughter wanted 3 candies because she was thinking about her grandson and Prince Chu. "I know, I'll get you 3 candies later." Xie Nana. If she hadn't been sitting on the dining chair, Susu would have hugged the queen grandmother's face and smacked her. After breakfast, the queen took out 3 candies for Susu, and she put the candies in the small pocket of her clothes. The queen suddenly remembered that when the clothes were made, the crown princess's suggestion was to make 2 pockets on the small clothes. She now understood that the crown princess really understood the needs of a foodie. Susu happily returned to the East Palace with 3 candies. As soon as she returned to the East Palace, she happily shared the candies with Kyokuo and Zio. Dao Tao had just finished practicing calligraphy when her sister stuffed a candy in her hand. Kyokuo, a little candy. Dao Tao took the candy and said happily, yes sister. Susu came to Chu Lingfeng again and stuffed the candy into his hand, Xiao Kyokuo also a little candy. Chu Lingfeng looked at the candies in his hand. The candy he ate the most was the one Susu gave him, and it was very sweet. Thank you Susu. While Chu Lingfeng and Dao Tao were studying hard, Susu started to miss her mother after eating the candy, so she took Dabai out for a walk to see if she could find her mother. Susu followed Dabai, and the maids and servants took a detour when they saw her, for fear of being pounced on by Dabai. Chang Liangyuan has not been having a good time recently. The queen's mind is on Susu, and the queen mother has Wangzhen by her side, and her love for her is not as good as before. Just came back from the queen, and saw Susu in the garden and the frightening tiger beside her. If it weren't for this tiger, how could she keep Susu? Huaixiang, is the medicine ready? My lady, the medicine is ready, and it will make the tiger fall asleep after eating it, Huaixiang said. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 523. Chang Liangyuan heard the words and looked at Susu again. She was wearing pink clothes and shuttled among the flowers, like a butterfly collecting honey. She didn't hate children, but she couldn't like the child because it was Shen Shui's. If it wasn't Shen Shui, her aunt would treat her well, and the position of the crown princess would also be hers. As long as she thought that the position of the crown princess was taken away by Shen Shui, the resentment in her heart rose like a storm. Let someone feed the tiger. Yes, young master, the person Huaixiang found was a little eunuch with nimble hands and feet, who was a little courageous for money. The little eunuch found a large piece of meat and stuffed the medicine into the meat. Seeing a man and a tiger coming towards him, he threw the meat in his hand and it happened to be in front of the tiger. Dabai followed Susu leisurely, and a large piece of meat fell from the sky, which made it pause. It lowered its head and smelled it. It was a piece of fresh meat. Dabai has been used to eating cooked meat since he was a child and has no interest in raw meat. However, the emperor thought that tigers were wild beasts and it was not good to eat only cooked food, so he asked people to feed them raw meat. Dabai licked his lips when he smelled the meat, raised his head and looked at Susu, and found that she did not stop to wait for him. He glanced at the meat on the ground, raised his head and howled at Susu. Awoo! Susu heard Dabai's cry, stopped, turned back to look at Dabai, and saw that it was standing still, so he trotted back. Dabai looked down at the meat and motioned for Susu to take a look. Susu touched Dabai's ear with one hand and looked down at the meat on the ground curiously. Her big blinking eyes looked left and right in confusion. Whose meat is spicy? Dabai rubbed Susu's little hand with his head. Awoo! The little eunuch hiding in the dark kept staring at the man and the tiger, eager to let the tiger eat the meat. As long as he ate the meat, he would get money. He specially selected fresh meat for fear that the tiger would not eat it. I just watched for a long time, thinking that the tiger would eat the meat as soon as it saw it, but it didn't. This tiger must be a fool. Susu watched for a long time, but didn't see anyone coming. She always patted Dabai's furry head with her chubby little hands. Hoo, bite the meat. Dabai then lowered his head and bit the meat. Susu saw Dabai biting the meat, and then continued to walk forward with his 2 short legs. Dabai followed Susu slowly with the meat in his mouth. The little eunuch hiding in the dark was so excited to see the tiger biting the meat, but the next second, he was disappointed to see the tiger biting the meat and following the little princess, but he didn't mean to eat it. Is this tiger a bitch? The little eunuch was so angry that he hammered the stone beside him, and his face turned pale immediately. It hurts. He covered his hand and turned his head to look over, only to realize that the place he had just hammered was the stone on the rockery. He was so angry that he forgot that the place he was hiding was a rockery. Seeing the tiger walk away, he endured the pain and followed. At this time, at the door of the imperial kitchen, there is an old tiger. The maid who was doing odd jobs screamed in fear when she saw the tiger, and her legs went limp and she fell to the ground. Where is the tiger? The young eunuch ran out upon hearing the sound, and turned and ran away when he saw the tiger coming. As a result, he could only walk with the door frame because his legs were limp. He howled towards the imperial kitchen, "There really is a tiger coming." Everyone in the palace knew that the young princess had raised a tiger. Those who had seen it were terrified at the sound, and those who had not seen it dared not to go and watch, because tigers eat people. Susu had come to the imperial kitchen with Chengzi a few days ago, and she remembered the way. This time she came to give the meat to the cook in the imperial kitchen. Susu thought that the people in the imperial kitchen would be very happy to see her delivering the meat, but when she saw them falling to the ground, her beautiful eyes were full of doubts. She took a few steps forward and came to the palace maid who had fallen to the ground. She propped her hands on her knees and tilted her head to look at her. "I'm here to give you some meat." The palace maid was so scared that she almost cried. Even though the little princess in front of her was cute and lovable, she was still so scared that she couldn't say a word for a long time. At this time, Eunuch De came out of the imperial kitchen, followed by several young eunuchs. When he saw the little princess and was about to salute, he saw the tiger beside him and stepped back in fear. Susu looked at everyone who looked scared, turned her head to look at Dabai, and seemed to understand. She walked towards Dabai, hugged Dabai's neck, and said in a baby voice, "It's my hoo-hoo, it won't bite." Then, she pointed at the meat in Dabai's mouth and said, "Your meat has fallen off, I'm here to give you some meat." Dabai lowered his head and put the meat in his mouth on the ground, then raised his head and looked at the group of people in front of him, his eyes fierce and vigilant. It has long been rumored that the little princess has been with the white tiger since she was a few months old. She can understand the white tiger's words, and the white tiger also listens to the little princess. Seeing it today, it really opened everyone's eyes. Seeing this scene, Eunuch De bravely stepped forward to salute, and glanced at the meat on the ground. "Little princess, it's so hot, and you still have to run here in person." Susu didn't stay long after completing the task, and waved, "Let's go." Eunuch De bowed and said goodbye. "Little princess, take care." Susu turned around and walked out of the imperial kitchen with two short legs. Dabai glanced at the people in the imperial kitchen, frightened them and gasped. It retracted its gaze, and slowly followed Susu. After the little princess walked away, the little eunuch couldn't help but say, "Eunuch De, the little princess is so amazing, at such a young age, she can make this white tiger obey her." Eunuch De looked at the man and the tiger and was also full of admiration. "It's really amazing. No wonder there is no guard around him. With this white tiger, who dares to get close?" The little eunuch who had been following Susu saw that the white tiger not only did not eat the meat, but also sent the meat to the imperial kitchen. He almost choked to death with a mouthful of old blood. Not eating the meat but sending it to the imperial kitchen, what's the trick? The thing was not done, and the little eunuch could only go back to report. Chang Liangyuan got very angry when she learned that the thing was not done. What a useless thing. Huaixiang comforted, "Young master, don't be angry, there must be another chance." Chang Liangyuan picked up the teacup and took a few sips of tea, but felt unwilling again. "Where is Susu now?" I heard from the little eunuch that she might have gone to the imperial study, Huixiang said. Chang Liangyuan frowned. Imperial study. What is the imperial study? It is the place where the emperor and ministers discuss important political affairs and military secrets. No one is allowed to enter without being summoned. But Susu can come and go freely, and no one dares to stop her. This is enough to show how much the emperor dotes on this granddaughter. The more this happened, the more unwilling Chang Liangyuan was. It was clearly within her reach, but it was snatched away by Shen Chuwei. Shen Chuwei can be so favored, but she just relies on giving birth to a daughter. You can think of a way. As long as you get rid of her, I don't believe Shen Chuwei can still be so favored. Huixiang has been with Chang Liangyuan for a long time and knows too well how powerful it is. Don't worry, my lady, I will think about it again, and there will be a way. Asterisk. In the imperial study, the emperor brought Susu here countless times. Even if Susu didn't know the way, she knew it now. She brought Dabai all the way through the city, and no one dared to step forward or stop her. They were not only afraid of Dabai, but also afraid of Susu, the little ancestor. Susu came all the way to the imperial study. Eunuch Li saw Susu from a distance, and went to meet her with a smile, raising his hand to block the sun. Little princess, it's so hot, why didn't you ask someone to hold an umbrella for you? Susu thought for a while and said, I have a whirlwind. She turned her head to look at Dabai and said, it doesn't know how to hold an umbrella. Eunuch Li glanced at Dabai. If he hadn't seen it often and knew that it wouldn't attack people easily, he wouldn't be standing here calmly at this moment. Little princess, go in first, it's cool inside. Then I'll go in, Susu said and walked in. Dabai followed. At first, Eunuch Li didn't let Dabai follow. That time, Dabai roared, which scared Eunuch Li's legs. The guards went forward and were injured by Dabai. Susu saw a group of people surrounding Dabai and cried immediately. The emperor was so distressed that he asked Dabai to go in with him. The guards didn't dare to relax their vigilance and followed in, for fear that Dabai would suddenly go crazy and bite people. The strange thing is that after Dabai followed Susu in, he was so well behaved that he lay at the door without moving, just like the stone lion at the door. So from then on, Dabai could follow Susu wherever she went. After Susu went in, Eunuch Li told the eunuch beside him, go and prepare some delicious snacks. The little princess's favorite ones. Run faster and don't let the little princess wait. I know. The eunuch turned around and trotted away. Susu lay on the door frame and looked inside. Dabai stood behind Susu and imitated Susu, looking inside with his head tilted. Susu wanted to see if the emperor was busy. If he was, she would wait a while before going in. At this time, the emperor was discussing the war with the ministers, and he had a memorial just sent back from the front line in his hand. Near the end, the emperor saw a dark head lying at the door, and a big white head behind it. Seeing his precious granddaughter, the emperor's fatigue from a busy day suddenly disappeared. He smiled and waved to his granddaughter, baby, come here. Susu saw the emperor waving at her, and she didn't care that there was someone inside. She let go of the door frame and trotted in. Dabai followed him in, but didn't go inside. It just stepped over the threshold, lay down inside the door, and looked at Susu quietly. The censors and military officers saw the little princess trotting towards the emperor. They were no longer surprised by this scene. At the same time, they couldn't help but look back at the door and saw Dabai at the door. They were so scared that they didn't dare to breathe. The little princess was not surprised, but no matter how many times Dabai had seen it, just standing there with that size was enough to make people's legs weak. Susu came to the dragon case and opened her arms to hug. Grandpa, hold the baby. Baby, the emperor was very busy these 2 days, so he didn't see his precious granddaughter. Now that his granddaughter came to him, he was naturally very happy. Susu looked up at the people in the imperial study and asked in a low voice, "Grandpa Emperor, are you busy?" No, the emperor smiled and looked at his precious granddaughter, waving to the ministers below, indicating that they could leave. The ministers were very happy and turned around and left one after another. But when they looked back and saw Dabai at the door, they were all scared again. The military officers were fine, and a few of them walked out of the imperial study with courage. The censors were so angry when they saw the military officers leave like this. They were all unarmed censors, and they couldn't take their brothers with them. In the end, the guards escorted the censors out. At this time, Eunuch Li came in with cakes and saw the emperor and the little princess in front of the dragon case. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty, this is the new cake made in the imperial kitchen. It is sweet but not greasy." The emperor knew that his granddaughter loved to eat, so he handed one of the dishes to her and said with a smile, "Baby, come and eat cakes." Susu has a special liking for food. Seeing the delicious cakes, she poked her little hand, picked up a piece and put it in her mouth to take a bite, her eyebrows curved with joy. "Grandpa Emperor, good." The emperor looked at his granddaughter eating 3 cakes in a row and couldn't help asking, "Didn't the baby have lunch?" Susu patted her belly and said in a baby voice, "I'm so full every time." The emperor looked at his granddaughter's actions and laughed, "Why are you eating so many cakes now?" Susu's mouth was full of cakes, and she said vaguely, "I walked a lot, and then I was hungry." The emperor scratched his granddaughter's nose. The baby is getting better and better at talking, and the excuses are so good. When Susu was eating the 4th cake, she suddenly thought of her mother. "Grandpa, I miss my mother and father. Grandpa, can you take me to find them?" The emperor looked at Susu. He hadn't seen his parents for half a year. It was normal to miss them. He also felt distressed that he had been separated from his father for so long at such a young age. "Your father and mother are in Mobei, and they will be back soon?" Susu asked with a puzzled look. "How long is how long?" The emperor and the queen had the same difficulty after hearing this. Grandpa can't tell the specific time, baby just needs to know that she can see father and mother soon. Susu said seriously, "Yes, I want to see mom and father as soon as I open my eyes." The emperor looked at his granddaughter with not only heartache, but also a little guilty. "Grandpa, as the king of a country, can't satisfy baby's wish. It's grandpa's fault. He shouldn't let your father lead the army to fight, and he won't let you not see them for half a year." Susu didn't understand what grandpa was saying. She took a bite of the pastry, thought about it, and smacked grandpa's cheek. The emperor sighed helplessly, hugged Susu, got up and walked out of the imperial study, and walked towards Fenji Palace. The annual Cacao Festival, the prosperous streets of the capital are more lively than ever. At the time of lighting, the number of vendors on the long street was more than double that of the past, and the street was full of lanterns. There were also many boys and girls on the street. Su Qingqing lay on the balcony of her house, watching the people coming and going on the street, most of whom were boys and girls. After such a long time, her face was still the same. She wore the scarf every day and got used to it. Caxia had been with the young lady since she was a child, and knew that she loved the hustle and bustle, so she persuaded her, "Young lady, let's go down and join in the fun, shall we?" "No, it's meaningless." Su Qingqing held her chin with both hands, and suddenly remembered that Jun Wuxian said that the Cacao Festival in their place was the day when boys and girls confessed their love and gave each other tokens of love. I don't know if he is shopping with a young lady at this moment. Since Jun Wuxian left, Caxia found that her young lady was not as happy as before, and rarely went out of the house. Caxia continued to persuade, "Miss, it's such a lively festival, it's a pity not to go out for a walk. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 524. Su Qingqing put down her hand and turned to look at Caxia. "What do you know?" Today is the Cacao Festival, how can there be no boys and girls showing affection on the street? I am a single dog and I will definitely be fed up with dog food if I go out. Caksia was confused. Miss, I don't understand what you say more and more. Miss is from a famous family, how can you be compared with a dog? Even if I am a maid, I don't eat what a dog eats, how can Miss eat it? Su Ching Ching, next time I read a romance novel, I still have to drag Caksia to read it together, otherwise it will be difficult to chat. Miss, let's go out for a walk, let's also go to the seventh sister to ask for marriage. Caksia was eager to try. In the end, Su Ching Ching compromised. She didn't want to be forced to eat dog food, but Caksia was willing to eat it. She stood up, took out her handkerchief, and adjusted the tassels at her temples. Forget it, I will take you out for a walk. Caksia saw that the lady was willing to go out, and happily followed her. Su Ching Ching went out with her personal maid, and was seen by the general's wife. The general's wife had been worried about her daughter and found that she was not as lively as before. She knew that it was mostly because of her face. Seeing her daughter go out of the house to pay respects to her seventh sister, she was so happy. Chang Feng, follow me, don't let Ching Ching be bullied. Don't worry, mother, your son will never let anyone bully your sister. After Su Changfeng finished speaking, he turned around and followed. In order to let his sister have fun, he just followed from a distance, as long as he made sure that his sister was not bullied. During the Cacao Festival, the streets were several times more lively than usual. Boys and girls who usually don't go out will also go out to pay respects to their seventh sister today. Su Ching Ching looked at the lively streets. This was the first time she had celebrated the Cacao Festival since she left the palace. Before she entered the palace, her brothers took her out to play. A few years passed in a flash. Su Ching Ching felt that time passed so quickly. She was almost 20 years old. Hey, isn't this Ching Ching? Are you here to pay respects to the seventh sister as well? Su Ching Ching heard a familiar female voice, looked back, and saw a woman in rose-red clothes standing less than 2 meters away from her. The woman had delicate makeup on and wore a luxurious pearl hairpin on her head. This woman was Cao Yan Ran, the legitimate daughter of Duke Cao, who was 1 year younger than her and liked to compare herself with others in everything. She just couldn't stand it, so every time she saw her comparing herself with others, she would say a few words. Cao Yan Ran was not someone who was easy to bully. Every time she wore gold and silver, she would show off. Every time there was a tea party, it was inevitable that several rich girls would show off their headdresses, clothes, etc. After Su Ching Ching came out of the palace, she had only seen Cao Yan Ran once, and it was a party held by a group of rich girls for her. At first, she thought they really missed her, but after going there, she realized that their purpose was just to see how sad she was after being driven out of the palace. It was a pity that they were disappointed, and she was very happy, not disappointed at all. Cao Yan Ran did not come out alone. There was another person standing next to her, and that person was the champion who was rejected by her before, Du Haiheng. A few days ago, I heard that the champion and Cao Yan Ran, the daughter of the Duke's mansion, were about to get engaged. When I saw her today, I knew that the rumor was true. Du Haiheng saw Su Ching Ching who rejected him. He had heard that Su Ching Ching was disfigured. Now he saw her wearing a veil. Needless to say, it must be a bit disfigured, but it still felt a little incredible. This is probably the turn of events. Will Su Ching Ching regret rejecting him? Du Haiheng stepped forward to greet him, Miss Su. Su Ching Ching ignored Cao Yan Ran's deliberate address and smiled and said, "Today's Cacao Festival is so lively, how can I be missing?" She glanced at Du Haiheng again, the champion is here too. Du Haiheng looked down at Cao Yan Ran. Although she was not as beautiful as Su Ching Ching, she was also a beauty. What's more, compared with the disfigured Su Ching, she was better. I came here with Yan Ran. Cao Yan Ran looked up at Du's Haiheng, her eyes full of shyness. Su Ching rolled her eyes. She had just gone out and hadn't played yet, but she was forced to feed dog food, and she was feeding it to her. Cao Yan Ran retracted her gaze and looked at Su Ching, glancing at the veil on her cheek. As a woman, she knew too well why she wore a veil. She must be too ugly to be seen in public. She was slightly inferior in appearance before. Now, Su Ching is not worthy of being compared with her. Cao Yan Ran's eyes were full of pride. Yes, Ching likes the most lively, and the Cacao Festival is so lively, Ching will definitely not miss it, but... Cao Yan Ran looked around and pretended to be surprised. Why did Ching come out alone? Su Ching glanced at Caxia beside her, who said, I came out alone? Didn't Miss Cao see my maid? Caxia also took 2 steps forward in cooperation. The smile on Cao Yan Ran's lips froze. She knew what she meant, but she still mentioned the maid on purpose. Is the maid considered a human being? I heard someone came to propose marriage a while ago. Why didn't you bring Ching with you? Su Ching is now disfigured. Those who are willing to come to propose marriage are not a good match. Most people would not even hide when they know she is disfigured. In front of Du's Haiheng, Cao Yan Ran must have heard about the blind date before. Cao Yan Ran said this just to slap her in the face and make her lose face. Really? I didn't even know someone came to propose marriage, but you knew it? Do you have the ability to predict the future? Then tell me when I can meet my ideal husband. Su Ching looked at Cao Yan Ran with a smile, as if she was waiting. Cao Yan Ran found that Su Ching was a little different from before. She would not have said that before. I just heard it. Since Ching said no, it must be someone else's nonsense. Su Ching said, today, it is said that I am engaged. Will it be said tomorrow that I have a child out of wedlock? Miss Cao likes to associate with this kind of people. No wonder we have only met once since I left the palace. Fortunately, I will not be friends with such people, so as not to lower my taste. Cao Yan Ran's face changed immediately after hearing this. After entering the palace, her ability to confront people has improved. She clenched her handkerchief in anger and forced a smile on the surface. It's just a joke. Ching, don't be angry. Su Ching rolled her eyes at Cao Yan Ran and ignored her. She was in a bad mood to begin with, and when she met Cao Yan Ran, her mood was greatly reduced. Just as she was about to leave, Cao Yan Ran called her unwillingly, Ching, guess the riddles and get a lantern. Su Ching looked in the direction of Cao Yan Ran's finger and saw a high platform in front of her. On the high platform, there was a banner that read, guess the riddles and get a pair of blessing lanterns. Guess 3 riddles in a row and get a day trip to Wanfen Villa. The back mountain of Wanfen Villa is full of maple trees. It is autumn now. The maple trees on the mountain look like a sea of flaming red flowers from a distance. Wanfen Villa is a private villa and is not open to the public. Who is willing to give up this opportunity to go in for a day trip? The high platform was full of people, men and women, all wanting to compete for the day trip to Wanfen Villa. Du's Haiheng saw that Cao Yan Ran was interested, and he was the top scholar, so he naturally wanted to compete. I'll try. Cao Yan Ran looked at Du's Haiheng shyly, feeling proud and happy. Okay. Du's Haiheng smiled, glanced at Su Ching, and walked into the crowd and went up the high platform. Cao Yan Ran looked at Su Ching with a smile on her face. Ching, you should join us, then we can go to Wanfen Villa together. Su Ching said indifferently, I'm not interested. At this time, a figure walked out of the crowd, climbed onto the platform with Ching Gong, and after standing firmly, he howled to Su Ching, sister, I'll help you. Su Qingqing saw the little brother on the platform and waved her handkerchief at him in surprise. "Brother, come on." Cao Yanran saw Su Changfeng standing on the platform, handsome and elegant, with flying eyebrows, and she felt unhappy. At first, she liked Su Changfeng, but she hinted many times and asked Su Changfeng to come to propose marriage, but she was ignored, so she agreed to let her father marry the champion Du's Haiheng. Although she was unwilling in her heart, she thought that Du's Haiheng was the champion and Su Changfeng had nothing, and was not as good as Du's Haiheng at all, so she would definitely win, and she could be proud of it at the same time. There were many people who participated in the competition, but they wanted to retreat just by looking at the champion. Wouldn't it be a slap in the face to show off in front of the champion? There were 6 people on the stage in total. These 6 people were also famous families in the capital, and they were well educated. Naturally, they wanted to compete. Just as the lantern riddle guessing was about to start, another figure flew over from the high platform. When the person landed steadily on the high platform, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. The person was wearing a dark purple wide-sleeved gold brocade robe, with a noble temperament, a purple gold crown, and long black hair. It was as if he had walked out of a painting, which made people amazed. The man had a pair of auspicious phoenix eyes, as if he didn't care about anything, with a bit of willful and unrestrained. This young man is so handsome. Whose young man is this? Why haven't I seen him before? There were heated discussions and praises all around. Only Su Qingqing stared at the man on the high platform for a long time, and she couldn't believe that he would come to Daxia today. After not seeing him for almost 50 days, he was still handsome, and he looked even more handsome when holding a fan. I finally saw Jun Wuxian again. Cao Yanran was also amazed by the young man on the stage. She was curious about which famous family he came from, and she had the illusion that they had met too late. She turned her head to glance at Su Qingqing, only to see that she had been staring at the young man. "Qingqing, are you crazy about him?" "But it's normal, because he is handsome," Cao Yanran said in a joking tone. Su Qingqing rarely denied or said anything, but nodded in agreement. "Well, he is indeed very handsome, much more handsome than the top scholar." Cao Yanran's face, which had just eased after hearing this, became ugly again. She snorted in her heart, and didn't she look at how her face was ruined? Still want to covet him? Du's Haiheng is indeed not as handsome as him. I value his character rather than his appearance. Besides, Du's Haiheng is a top scholar, and he cannot be compared with beauty alone. Su Qingqing stared at the figure for a long time, and unconsciously uttered a sentence, "Not entirely." Cao Yanran was unhappy, but it was not easy to tear her face, so it was a good opportunity for her to see the knowledge of the top scholar. "You will know after you see it later." Su Qingqing ignored Cao Yanran. With the sound of a gong, the lantern riddle guessing began. The representative of the organizer was a man in his 30s, with a handsome face, and it was obvious that he was a scholar. Behind him was a row of red lanterns, all of which contained lantern riddles. "Gentlemen, guessing lantern riddles is a quick answer question. Whoever knows the answer can say it out first, without worrying about gentlemanly manners." After the representative of the organizer explained the rules, he came under the red lantern, grabbed the tassel and pulled it down, and the lantern riddle came out. "There is a seed in the watermelon, guess a word." Jun Wuxian, lonely. The 6 people were confused for a moment when Jun Wuxian answered before they could react. The organizer smiled and said, "This gentleman answered correctly. The answer is, I am alone." Su Changfeng couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "Mr. Jun, you are amazing." Su Changfeng noticed Jun Wuxian when he came up. His sister must be happy when Jun Wuxian came. Jun Wuxian smiled slightly, "Thank you." Du's Haiheng glanced at Jun Wuxian. He also knew the answer, but he was a little slower. he wouldn't have such a good opportunity next time. The second riddle was, it's hard to fly with two wings. It's both a garment and a house. It's better to let the flood blow it down to the sea than let the sun dry the house. Guess an animal. June Wuxian, clam. June Wuxian got the first answer again. The organizer couldn't help but take another look at June Wuxian. This gentleman answered correctly, the answer is clam. Su Changfeng stared at the riddle for a long time, but couldn't guess it. He looked at June Wuxian with wide eyes, you can guess this. Not only Su Changfeng was surprised, but also the other gentlemen were surprised, because they had just finished reading the riddle, and June Wuxian had already answered it. Who could beat him? Du Haihang frowned, he didn't expect that he, a top scholar, would be at a disadvantage. A young man asked Du Haihang curiously, "Number one scholar, have you guessed it?" Du Haihang pretended to be calm and said, "Of course I guessed it, but I answered a little slowly." The man praised, "Number one scholar is really different." The representative of the organizer reminded again, "This young man has answered two questions correctly and won a pair of blessing lanterns. If he answers another question correctly, he will be eligible for a one-day tour of Wanfen Villa and can bring a companion. If they don't get the last question, they will have no chance. They are eager to try." The third riddle is, a group of sheep came, guess a fruit. The 7 people were stunned when they saw the riddle. Su Changfeng scratched his head and turned to look at June Wuxian, "Mr. June, do you know?" June Wuxian chuckled, "You don't know?" Su Changfeng answered honestly, "I don't know." This time even Mr. June doesn't know. Someone couldn't help asking Du Haihang, "Does the number one scholar know?" Du Haihang frowned, always feeling that this is not a riddle. Sheep are coming, what the hell is it? The representative of the organizer looked at the 7 young men in front of him calmly, as if he had expected it, and raised the corners of his lips slightly. June Wuxian waved his folding fan and uttered 2 words lightly, "Strawberry." Du Haihang sneered, "There is no such fruit as strawberry." The smile on the organizer's face froze for a moment, and then he smiled and asked, "This young man, please answer the riddle." June Wuxian said calmly, "A group of sheep came, and sheep naturally have to eat grass. After a group of sheep eat the grass is gone, which is homophonic to strawberry. But Daxia doesn't have this kind of fruit." "That's right, I haven't heard of it." Everyone raised doubts one after another. Su Changfeng remembers that his sister wrote home and said she wanted to eat strawberries. "I heard that my sister ate strawberries in the palace." June Wuxian turned his head and looked at Su Changfeng, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. "Ching Ching has eaten strawberries. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 525. Su Changfeng saw that June Wuxian was so serious, and he also replied seriously, "I heard from my sister that I have eaten. Is there anything wrong with Mr. June?" A flicker of doubt flashed across June Wuxian's eyes. He could guess this riddle only because Xiaju told him that there was indeed no fruit like strawberry in Daxia, so how could Su Ching have eaten it? Just when everyone was confused, 3 gongs sounded on the stage, which also meant the end of this round of guessing lantern riddles. The representative of the organizer smiled and congratulated, "Congratulations to this young man, your answer is correct." After speaking, he said to the assistant on the side, "Bring the prize over." The assistant handed 2 blessing lanterns to June Wuxian respectively. The representative of the organizer came over with the token and said warmly, "This is the token to enter the Wanfen Villa. You can enter by taking this token when you enter the villa." June Wuxian held the blessing lantern in one hand and freed his other hand to take the token. The token was made of wood and carefully made, with the word "Evening Breeze" engraved on it. After the lantern riddle guessing was over, everyone on and off the stage was filled with sighs. The number one scholar actually guessed every lantern riddle. Isn't that right? That young master is very elegant and can guess lantern riddles with ease and ease. Isn't the champion man's water content a bit high? Su Changfeng didn't care whether he won or lost. He came here just to win. He didn't get the opportunity to take a one-day trip to Wanfen Villa. It would be nice to get a blessing lantern to make his sister happy. Now that Mr. Jun has got it, it must be for his sister, as long as the purpose is achieved. Du Haiheng, on the other hand, looked a little unhappy as he listened to everyone's discussion. He was the newly promoted champion, but he was actually compared with someone he didn't know. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't even get off the stage. When Su Qingqing saw that Jun Wuxian had won, the corners of her mouth unconsciously curved beautifully. She glanced at Cao Yanran, flicked the handkerchief in her hand, covered her mouth and laughed, "Miss Cao, I've let you down, your fiancé lost." Cao Yanran was not as proud as before. When she saw Du Haiheng losing, her face immediately changed and became ugly. When she heard Su Qingqing's sarcastic remarks, she couldn't pretend anymore. "Why are you happy? This young master is very impressive and well educated, but he doesn't look down on an ugly guy like you. If he is not scared away by your face, it's because he is brave." Jun Wuxian walked over with a faint smile, stood in front of Su Qingqing, and handed the bullying lantern and token in front of her. "Qingqing, this is for you." Su Qingqing originally wanted to scold Cao Yanran, but when she saw Jun Wuxian walking towards her, she had no time to care about others. She was a little nervous. She hadn't seen him for more than a month, and he suddenly appeared again. She was nervous at the same time. Still very happy. When she saw him giving her the prize he won, she almost burst into tears of joy. Su Qingqing is not a pretentious person. Jun Wuxian said he would give it to her, so she went ahead. "You are so awesome. You guessed all the difficult lantern riddles correctly." Jun Wuxian only felt that Su Qingqing's mouth was getting sweeter and sweeter, and she was almost catching up with Xiaoju. He gently tapped her head with the folding fan in his hand. "The mouth is getting sweeter and sweeter." Su Qingqing looked at the lanterns and tokens in her hands. After hearing this, she raised her head and looked at Jun Wuxian. When she came into contact with those gentle eyes, all her previous efforts were in vain. She had previously thought that it was impossible for her to be with Jun Wuxian, and that it was good to just be friends. Now, she felt that she still couldn't treat him as just a friend. Cao Yanran's jaw dropped when she saw this scene. It turned out that Su Qingqing didn't know this young master. Not only did she know him, but he actually treated Su Qingqing very well. Could it be that this young master doesn't know that Su Qingqing is disfigured? Jun Wuxian smiled when he saw her reaction, and looked away at Cao Yanran, the smile in his eyes disappearing. "We are both women, but instead of being sympathetic, you speak evil words. Qingqing's face just has 2 more scars. Compared with your vicious and maggot-infested heart, you are more disgusting and cannot be avoided." Cao Yanran was stunned when she heard this. How had she ever been accused and insulted like this before? Or because Su Qingqing is such an ugly person? This humiliation was no less humiliating than that of the number 1 scholar when he figured out all the lantern riddles. Du Haiheng came over at this time. Originally, he wanted to leave directly, but after all, Cao Yanran was his fiancée and the legitimate daughter of Cao Kuagong, so he came over and wanted to take her with him regardless of face. "Yanran, let's go." Cao Yanran also wanted to leave, but she was a little unwilling to accept being scolded like this and had to swallow her anger. She glanced at Su Qingqing, who was holding the prize with a proud smile on her face. She snorted, "Since the young master doesn't value appearance so much, then marry Su Qingqing. Only by marrying her will I believe that the young master really doesn't care about appearance. It's the appearance that counts, but the heart." When Su Qingqing heard this, she first glanced at Jun Wuxian. Cao Yanran said this just to embarrass Jun Wuxian. She was also afraid that Jun Wuxian would be embarrassed, and she was also afraid that because of this incident, she would no longer even be friends. When she looked at Cao Yanran, she said coldly, "Master Jun and I are good friends, how can friends care about appearance? Miss Cao is so persuasive and has such vicious thoughts, even the #1 scholar really dares to marry her." Cao Yanran was already angry, but Su Qingqing's words were like adding fuel to the fire, making it worse and worse. "Su Qingqing, what do you mean by this? No one wants your disfigurement, and you want to discredit me, right? Looking at the entire capital, which son of a famous family is willing to marry an ugly guy like you?" Ever since she was disfigured, Su Qingqing knew that no man would marry a disfigured woman, and she had long been prepared not to get married. However, when Cao Yanran said these words, she still felt a little sad. "What's sad is not that I don't want to marry her. But..." Jun Wuxian looked at Cao Yanran with cold eyes. He looked ugly when he opened his mouth or shut up. Although Su Qingqing had scars on her face, she had nothing to do with ugly people. "I will marry her without you having to worry about it." As soon as these words came out, everyone around was shocked. Cao Yanran looked at Jun Wuxian in surprise, suspecting that there was something wrong with his ears. He was willing to marry Su Qingqing even if she was disfigured? Du Haiheng also showed surprise. As a man, he knew men too well. Which man would want to marry an ugly guy? Su Qingqing was more shocked than any of them. Jun Wuxian actually said he would marry her? He said personally that he would not marry an ugly person. She stared at Jun Wuxian without blinking, but his calm face made it impossible to tell whether he was joking or speaking from his heart. But soon, she realized that Jun Wuxian probably didn't want to be bullied because of his appearance. It is said that a good match is made between a talented man and a beautiful woman. Now Jun Wuxian did not dislike Su Qingqing's face and was willing to marry her. Some people were envious and others were jealous. Cao Yanran was dragged away by Du Haiheng. Instead of fighting over who would win or lose, it would be better to leave to avoid making people laugh. When Su Changfeng saw Jun Wuxian accompanying his sister, he didn't go up to disturb her. He bought snacks and stood aside to eat, planning to go back and recover after finishing the meal. As a result, he heard Jun Wuxian threatening to marry his sister. He was shocked at first, and then surprised. "Finally, my sister is willing to marry someone, and the person who marries her is still the person she likes." Su Changfeng finished the food in his hands in 2 or 3 mouthfuls, and then went home without stopping to announce the good news. The general's wife was drinking tea in the living room. When she saw her youngest son running in a hurry, she yelled in a low voice, "How old are you? You should be more prudent in your behavior." Su Changfeng ran back all the way. He was so thirsty that he picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. He drank several sips, took a breath and said, "Mother, this matter is very important. My son can't be stable even if he wants to." "What happened?" The general's wife thought of her daughter, and her expression immediately became nervous. Could something happen to Qingqing? "How can you be an elder brother? You can't even protect your sister." Su Changfeng comforted her, "Nothing happened to my sister, don't worry, mother." When the general's wife heard that something was wrong with her daughter, she picked up the teacup and continued drinking tea leisurely. "What is that?" Su Changfeng smiled and said, "Someone wants to marry my sister." The general's wife was most worried about her daughter's marriage now, and she was afraid of being wronged if she married into someone else's family. She immediately became energetic after hearing this. "Really? Whose young master?" The reaction of the general's wife was as expected by Su Changfeng, so he gave it a try and said, "Mother, guess who this person is." The general's wife was in a hurry, but her son still kept it secret. She picked up the round fan on the side and waved towards his head. "If I knew, Why would I need to ask you? Su Changfen was drinking tea when he was knocked down. He didn't dare to show off anymore. It's Mr. Jun. When the general's wife heard about Mr. Jun, her eyes lit up. She preferred Mr. Jun as her son-in-law because he had both talent and appearance and good character. The key was that her daughter liked him. Didn't young Master Jun leave? He's back again. Su Changfeng quickly drank a few sips of tea and said, I saw him on the street tonight. He is with his sister right now. Hearing this, the general's wife smiled. The relationship is good. Mr. Jun is a talented person, and his character is good. If Ching Ching can marry him, I can rest assured. Su Changfeng drank 2 cups of tea in a row, then sat down and drank the 3rd cup of tea slowly. Asterisk. The streets are still bustling with activity. There were so many people just now that Su Ching Ching didn't have the chance to ask. Now that everyone had dispersed, she couldn't help but ask, it's a coincidence that you came, just in time for the Chiao Chiao festival. I thought I wouldn't see you for another half a year. Jun Wuxian lowered his eyes and looked at Su Ching Ching. He hadn't seen her for more than a month and found that she seemed to have lost weight again and her eyes were bigger than before. I haven't seen the Chiao Chiao festival in Daxia, so I came here to take a look. Jun Wuxian glanced at the busy street, which was almost full of people. It's very lively. Su Ching Ching said, that's natural. During the Kikiao festival, people who are usually busy with work will take time to pray. Jun Wuxian looked at Su Ching Ching. He had just said to marry her in front of so many people, but she didn't react at all. He looked at the street with people coming and going, which was not suitable for chatting. He looked away. Where do you plan to go next? Su Ching Ching saw the 2 blessing lanterns in her hands and raised them happily. Let's go put the lanterns together. I heard that praying for blessings will be very effective. Jun Wuxian, okay. There is a difference between flower lanterns and river lanterns, and the placement of them is also inappropriate. Put out lanterns to pray for blessings, and the river is near Yuelao Temple. When Su Ching Ching and Jun Wuxian arrived, there were already many boys and girls setting off lanterns by the river. Babies. Good night. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 526. Su Ching Ching brought Jun Wuxian to the place where lanterns were lit. There were people here to help light the lanterns. Money was given freely. Rich people would give more. They could earn a lot of money in a day. There were many people who came to light lanterns. Su Ching Ching and Jun Wuxian lined up together and soon it was their turn. After 2 lanterns were lit, Jun Wuxian generously rewarded them with broken silver. When the guy who lit the lanterns saw the broken silver, he smiled and said good things. The young man is romantic and suave, and the young lady is beautiful. A talented man and a beautiful woman, many children, and more blessings. Sure enough, everyone likes to hear good words. Su Ching Ching was still very happy after hearing it, but when she thought of her disfigurement, her smile gradually disappeared. When she came to the river, Su Ching Ching bent down and carefully put the lantern in her hand into the river, then gently stirred the water with her hands to let the lantern follow the river. She was actually very greedy and wanted everything. She wanted her family to be healthy and live a long life. I want Jun Wuxian to get up early and find his sister, so he doesn't have to travel all the time. I want to restore my previous appearance. I want. Jun Wuxian squatted beside Su Ching Ching, put the lantern in his hand into the river, and watched the lantern slowly catch up with Su Kingking's lantern. He looked at Su Ching Ching, wearing a veil, and the light was a little dim, so he couldn't see her expression at the moment. I heard from your brother that you ate strawberries, and in the palace, is that true? Su Qingqing raised her head and looked at Jun Wuxian, smiling and nodding. Of course it's true, the strawberries grown by the crown princess are especially delicious, and we can eat a lot every year. Speaking of this, she began to think about the crown princess and the babies again. The crown princess went out to find the crown prince and hasn't come back yet. Jun Wuxian asked, you said that the strawberries were planted by Shen Chuwei. Well, there is no such fruit in Daxia, nor in the palace. Only the crown princess's Xiun pavilion grows strawberries. Su Qingqing asked puzzledly, why do you ask this? Not only Daxia has no strawberries, but several surrounding countries also have no strawberries, but Xiaju knows. Jun Wuxian shook his folding fan and thought of Shen Chuwei. He suddenly felt that there were too many coincidences, but if Shen Chuwei was Xiaju, how could she be a member of the Shen family? Do you suspect that the crown princess might be your sister? I don't think so. She was brought back from the countryside by the Shen family. But the crown princess is very powerful. Many of the food I have never seen, and she showed me the storybooks, which can learn a lot of new knowledge. Speaking of the storybooks, Su Qingqing felt it was a pity that after leaving the palace, she couldn't even read the picture books. Jun Wuxian said, I did suspect it, but there is no evidence to prove that she is Xiaju. Su Qingqing comforted, don't worry, we will definitely find her. Jun Wuxian chuckled, let's go. It's rare to come to Daxia to catch up with the Cacao festival. Let's go somewhere else. Su Qingqing responded readily, okay. Not far behind them, Caxia was so excited, the young lady has been depressed for a while. Now that Mr. Jun is here, the young lady is finally alive. Chu Zhao sighed, does your young lady like my master? Caxia turned her head and looked at Chu Zhao, what's wrong? Can't I like her? Chu Zhao asked in confusion, then why didn't Miss Su react at all when my master said he wanted to marry her? Caxia said, didn't you see my young lady smile? That's called no reaction. Chu Zhao. Does that smile count? At this time in the palace, Susu has been trying to find her mother these days. The emperor felt distressed, thinking that today is the Cacao festival, and the streets of the capital must be very lively. When he was still the prince, he took the queen out to play. After so many years, he has never taken the queen out for a walk. So tonight, the emperor asked someone to bring Susu and Dao Tao to Fenji Palace. The emperor originally only thought of taking Susu, but it was Eunuch Li who reminded him that he was the grandson of the emperor, so he remembered to take them together. Queen, change your clothes, let's go out for a walk. Hearing this, the queen looked at the dog emperor taking off his clothes and changing into his daily clothes, still a little unbelieving. Your Majesty is so free today, willing to take me out for a walk. Today is the Cacao festival. I have been busy with government affairs for these years and have not taken you out for a walk. Let's go out for a walk while today is not too busy. The emperor urged, Queen, change your clothes quickly, Susu and Dao Tao will be here soon. Seeing that the dog emperor was serious, the queen did not hesitate to change her clothes. Who wouldn't be bored after staying in the palace for a long time? It is naturally a happy thing to go out for a walk on the Cacao festival. Are you going to take Dao Tao and Susu with you? The emperor tied his belt and took the time to reply, well, Susu has been saying that she misses her mother recently. Take her out to play, maybe she will forget about missing her mother. I haven't seen my mother for almost 2 months, so of course I miss her. With the help of Qingying, the queen put on her casual clothes. At this time, Dao Tao and Susu had been picked up by Eunuch Li. Grandpa Emperor, Grandma. The first thing the two little guys said when they came in was this. The emperor bent down and picked up Susu, turned his head and said to the queen, you hold Dao Tao is lighter than Susu. The queen said coquettishly, if you like to hold Susu, just say it directly, why are you making excuses? As she said that, She picked up Dao Tao and followed the emperor out. The emperor smiled but said nothing. But having said that, Dao Tao's weight is indeed lighter than Susu. Because they were leaving the palace incognito, they didn't bring many people with them, and the carriage they took was relatively ordinary. When they were riding in the carriage, Susu and Dao Tao were already lying on the window excitedly, staring outside. When the emperor and the empress saw each other, they smiled. It looks like I'll take them out to play more in the future. They look like country bumpkins coming into town. Everything they see is new. Linger is right. It's good to see more of the world. When they arrived at the busy long street, Susu and Dao Tao ran around excitedly. The emperor and empress followed closely behind, fearing that the two little guys would get lost. Susu's little legs were running very fast. It felt like a mythical beast came out of its cage, and it was overwhelming to see all the fun and delicious food. She pointed at the little rabbit noodle, then pointed at the scones, and shouted in a sweet voice, "Grandpa, Grandpa, I want this, I want this." When they were in the carriage, the emperor handed them over to the two brothers and sisters. When he got outside, he called him Grandpa, not Grandpa Emperor. The emperor doesn't care what his precious granddaughter wants to buy. Anyway, he should come down and buy whatever she wants. Okay, buy them all. The escort paid and then picked up the items. Susu held the rabbit noodle and happily ran to the queen, raising the noodle in her hand and said, "Grandma, little rabbit." The queen bent down, looked at the donut in Susu's hand, and praised with a smile, "What a cute rabbit, as cute as Susu." Susu smiled and arched her eyebrows. "Grandma is also very loving." The queen laughed out loud when she heard this. "Susi's mouth is so sweet." Susu came to Dao Tao with another noodle man and handed the noodle man in her hand to him. "Guo Guo, this is for you." Dao Tao looked at the face mask in his sister's hand. It was a tiger. He happily took it and looked at it carefully. "It looks like Dabai." Susu raised her chin and said, "Dabai is more loving than him." Hearing this, Dao Tao agreed very much with her sister's words. "Yes, it's great." Susu happily ran away with the noodles in hand. She saw a food stall and an unfamiliar delicacy. Out of novelty, she grabbed the emperor's sleeve and said, "Grandpa, I want this." The emperor picked up one and handed it to Susu's hand, smiling and saying, "Baby, eat it." "Thank you, Grandpa." Susu took the bamboo stick and put it in her mouth and took a bite. She found that it was delicious. She raised her head and looked at Grandpa Huang. "Grandpa, I still want 5 more nests." The emperor raised his head and ordered, "Buy 10. The guard took 10, took out his money bag, and paid the bill. While Susu was eating, the emperor raised his head and looked at the queen. "Is there anything you want to buy, Linger?" The queen glanced at the items on the stall and shook her head with a smile. "I am already a grandma, and these are not suitable for me. I am very happy to be able to go shopping during this festival." This was the truest word from the queen's heart. After entering the palace, what she thought about every day was when the prince would be able to take her out of the palace to play, and when the emperor would be able to spare time to accompany her out of the palace. During this period of time, the dog emperor was indeed different from before. He never visited anyone and came to Fenji Palace when he was not busy. Although she was a little repelled at first, she thought about it later and realized that if the dog emperor could keep it, she would forget about it. They have entered middle age and become grandparents. They don't know how long they can live. Cherish each day as it is. The dog emperor said, "If you don't let me eat enough, isn't it equivalent to pushing me to other women?" She thought about it and found it made sense. So during this period, she felt like she was back in her youth, when they were still the crown prince and princess. The emperor noticed that the queen had been staring at him. He reached out to hold her hand and asked gently, "Linger, what are you thinking about?" The queen smiled and shook her head. "I didn't think about anything. I haven't been out for a long time, so I'm a little happy. The emperor also knew that he was busy with government affairs and paid too little attention to her. He felt a little guilty. In the future, I will take you out more often. The queen nodded, okay. Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian walked around and ate street food, which they found quite interesting. Suddenly a child rushed over from the opposite side and was put directly into Jun Wuxian's arms. Fortunately, Jun Wuxian reacted quickly and helped the child who bumped into him in time to prevent her from falling. Susu forgot to look at the road while eating, ran too fast, and hit someone. She hurriedly apologized, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I gave you some candy, so don't be angry, okay? When Jun Wuxian saw the child's appearance, he was immediately startled. The girl's palm-sized face was fleshy, and her bright eyes flickered, as if she could talk. The little girl has 2 small hairpins on her head and butterfly beads on the front. She is wearing a pink dress and is as cute as a porcelain doll. What surprised him was not how beautiful the little girl was, but how much she looked like Xiaoju when she was a child. Su Qingqing hasn't seen Susu for 2 months, but she still recognizes her at a glance. Hey, isn't this Susu? Why are you here? Jun Wuxian raised his head and looked at Su Qingqing, do you know her? Of course. Su Qingqing leaned close to his ear and whispered, she is the princess's daughter, her name is Susu. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 527. Jun Wuxian was surprised to find that the little girl in front of him was Shen Chuwei's daughter. He looked at Susu again and looked at her features carefully. Shen Chuwei and Xiaoju look similar, and her daughter is exactly the same as Xiaoju when she was a child. Su Qingqing wore a veil and hadn't seen Susu for 2 months, so she didn't recognize her. At this time, Susu was lowering his head, pulling at his pocket with his little hand, took out a candy, and then raised it in front of Jun Wuxian. Give you candy? Jun Wuxian looked at the candies in front of him. Xiaoju liked to eat candies, and his pockets were always full of candies. If he made someone angry, he would use candies to comfort them. Looking at her serious look, she is exactly the same as Xiaoju. He smiled and said, keep the candy for yourself, be more careful next time and be careful not to fall. Susu's eyebrows arched when she heard this, then you're not angry anymore. How could Jun Wuxian be angry when facing such a cute little girl who was so similar to Xiaoju? Well, I'm not angry. Su Qingqing hadn't seen Susu for a long time, but she saw her now and was very happy. Susu, don't you remember me? I'm your godmother. Susu tilted her head and looked at the veiled woman in front of her, but she didn't recognize her for a moment. Su Qingqing was a little hurt. Susu didn't recognize her after just 2 months without seeing her. She touched her face and found that she was wearing a veil. Maybe it was because of the veil that she didn't recognize her. Dao Tao ran all the way over, grabbed her sister's hand, protected it behind her back, and looked at the man in front of her in confusion. Who are the muds? Jun Wuxian was still surprised that Susu was similar to Xiaoju, but now another identical child appeared, and it was a boy. He was stunned for a moment. Su Qingqing's eyes lit up when she saw Dao Tao. Dao Tao was smart, so she should still remember her, right? Dao Tao, do you still remember me? I am the godmother. Dao Tao also tilted her head and stared at her, her eyes falling on the veil on her cheeks, and she said in a sweet voice, tear off the veil and see if she is your godmother. Su Qingqing was a little touched. Dao Tao was indeed smarter and knew that she was asked to take off her veil. Just looking at the scar on her cheek, would she not be able to recognize it? She hesitated for a while and took off her veil, looking at Dao Tao anxiously. Dao Tao stared at that face for a while. Susu also came over and stared at the woman in front of her with Kuakuo. Jun Wuxian could guess that Dao Tao and Susu were twins, Shen Shui's children, even without asking. This is the first time that twins like a dragon and a phoenix can look so similar. The guard stood behind Dao Tao and Susu, watching them warily. At this time, the emperor and the queen also rushed over, each holding a hand. While the emperor and the empress were chatting, the two little guys ran away without winning. There were too many people coming and going, and they were crowded. If you were not careful, you would be squeezed into the crowd and lost sight of them. The emperor hugged Susu like a lost treasure and said, "Baby, you scared grandpa to death." Su Qingqing was shocked when she saw the emperor and queen. No wonder Dao Tao and Susu came out of the palace. It turned out that it was the emperor and the queen who came out to play with their grandchildren. She hurriedly stepped forward and saluted, "Your Majesty Su Qingqing." The emperor stopped him, "Don't make any noise." Su Qingqing stood up straight, lowered her eyes and said, "My lord, I understand." Susu hugged Grandpa Wang's neck, patted her breasts with her little hands and made a soothing sound, "Grandpa, don't be afraid." The emperor was warmed up by the actions of his precious granddaughter. The crown princess had a good saying, her granddaughter is just a caring little cotton-padded jacket, which makes people like her to no end. The queen hugged Dao Tao and looked at Su Qingqing, who was wearing a veil in front of her. If she hadn't taken the initiative to speak out, it would have been difficult to recognize her for a while. Su Qingjin has been missing for some time. Su Qingqing lowered her eyebrows and nodded, "I haven't seen you for a while, and I miss you very much." Jun Wuxian looked at the luxuriously dressed men and women in front of him. Even if he didn't reveal it, he knew their identities. They were the emperor and queen of Daxia. The emperor only wanted to have fun with the queen and grandchildren when he came out this time, and did not want to be disturbed by outsiders. "You go ahead and don't worry about us. Su Qingqing is blessed with a blessed life, the daughter of the people obeys her orders." She raised her head and looked at Dao Tao and Susu. They hadn't seen each other for 2 months. The two little guys had grown up a lot, and they didn't even have the chance to get close to them. The emperor and the queen continued to stroll around holding Dao Tao and Susu. Dao Tao lay on Grandma Wang's shoulder, looking at Su Qingqing, as if remembering something, and shouted, "Godmother." When Susu heard Guo Guo calling her godmother, she turned around and looked over. Perhaps due to Guo Guo's influence, she also followed the milky voice and shouted, "Godmother." When Su Qingqing heard them calling her, the disappointment she felt just now disappeared instantly, and she waved to them happily. After the emperor and the others walked away, Jun Wuxian lowered his eyes and looked at Su Qingqing, "You are quite fond of children." Su Qingqing raised her chin, "Of course, Dao Tao and Susu are smart and cute, the most lovable." Jun Wuxian chuckled, "Then after you get married and have a couple, you will definitely be cute and smart." That tone sounded like a joke to Su Qingqing's ears. She wasn't even planning to get married, so how could she have a child? She didn't answer, but changed the subject, "Let's continue shopping." Jun Wuxian asked, "Are you going to Yuelao Temple?" Su Qingqing didn't care where she went, as long as she didn't continue this topic. "Okay." Jun Wuxian looked back and saw Susu and Dao Tao who had disappeared into the crowd. Shen Shuwei and Xiaozhu looked similar. It was such a coincidence that they had a daughter who was almost exactly the same as Xiaozhu when she was a child. It seems that we need to investigate again. When they arrived at the Yulao Temple, which was surrounded by young men and women, Su Qingqing was stunned, and suddenly realized that the Yulao Temple was for seeking marriage. She had no marriage to seek. Could it be that Jun Wuxian wanted to seek marriage? Jun Wuxian put away his folding fan and said in a gentle voice, "Go in." Yes, Su Qingqing followed Jun Wuxian in. Inside the Yulao Temple, the Bodhi tree was full of signs for seeking marriage. At this time, next to the Bodhi tree, several young men and women were hanging signs for seeking marriage. Jun Wuxian glanced at the Yulao temple. The place was not big, and he could see it at a glance. There were many people. The Yulao temple seems to only seek marriage. Su Qingqing. Otherwise, why is it called the Yulao temple? She looked up at Jun Wuxian. Do you want to pray for marriage? Jun Wuxian looked at her with a smile. No need. Then why do you still want to come to Yulao temple? Come in and take a look out of curiosity. Speaking of which, a nobleman like Jun Wuxian doesn't need to pray for marriage, there must be countless women who like him. Jun Wuxian opened his folding fan again and looked at Su Qingqing sideways. Let's go to another place to play. Yes, Su Qingqing glanced at Yulao temple before leaving. In the past, she would definitely go in and pray for marriage, but now she doesn't need it. There are the most people at this time, especially Yulao temple. When Su Qingqing turned around, she was hit by someone coming in, and her center of gravity was unstable, and she fell backwards. She screamed, "Ah!" Jun Wuxian quickly stretched out his hand and picked up Su Qingqing, who was about to fall, and then protected her in his arms. There were too many people coming in, as if she was being chased. In fact, they were in a hurry to pray for marriage, because every year during the Cacao festival, if you come late, not only will the Bodhi tree be full of flowers, but even the marriage sign will be gone. Su Qingqing was startled because she almost fell, until she was protected by Jun Wuxian in his arms, her cheek pressed against his chest, and she seemed to feel his warm skin in the thin summer clothes. Thinking that she was being held by Jun Wuxian at this time, her face flushed, and her heart was beating wildly, and she couldn't stop for a moment. She secretly raised her head and glanced at Jun Wuxian. Due to the height difference, she could only see his beautiful jawline from this angle. His handsome face was looming under the light, making people unable to look away. Jun Wuxian saw that there were fewer people, so he let go of Su Qingqing in his arms. Okay, we can leave here. Yes, Su Qingqing blushed and stepped back from his arms, secretly glad that she was wearing a veil, otherwise Jun Wuxian would definitely see her blushing. After leaving the Yulao temple, Su Qingqing was a little absent-minded. Jun Wuxian looked at the stalls on both sides of the street. Seeing the noodle sellers, he thought that Xiaju liked noodle figurines very much, and girls should like them too. He grabbed Su Qingqing's wrist and walked towards the noodle seller's stall. Su Qingqing followed him with doubts. The noodle seller was an old man in his 50s, wearing coarse cloth, with gray hair and wrinkled cheeks. He smiled when he saw the customers. Sir, do you want to buy noodle figurines? Jun Wuxian turned his head and looked at Su Qingqing. Pick them yourself. Su Qingqing was stunned for a moment before she realized that Jun Wuxian was going to buy noodle figurines for her. Okay, she squatted down in front of the stall, looked at dozens of noodle figurines, and picked two, one male and one female, who were very beautiful. She held one in each hand and showed it to Jun Wuxian. I want these two. Jun Wuxian lowered his eyes and looked at the two noodle figurines in her hand, one male and one female, and praised, you picked well. Su Qingqing smiled with her eyebrows curved when she heard the words. Jun Wuxian took out the silver and handed it to the old man. No need to change. The old man looked at the silver in his hand. He couldn't buy so much silver even if he sold dough figurines for a year. When the old man looked up, Jun Wuxian and Su Qingqing had already walked away. Jun Wuxian glanced at the dough figurine in her hand, and then looked at Su Qingqing. Do you like it? Su Qingqing nodded vigorously. I like it. Jun Wuxian said, that's good. I have come into contact with very few women, and I don't know what girls like, but Xiaju said that most girls will like what she likes. Su Qingqing felt that her brain was not enough, and she didn't quite understand the meaning of Jun Wuxian's words, but it can be seen that Jun Wuxian dotes on his sister and remembers what his sister likes. Here, the emperor took the queen and the two babies to stroll for a long time. When he calculated that the time was about right, he took the two little guys back to the palace. The two little guys probably went out of the palace for the first time. They had a lot of fun and were reluctant to leave. The emperor promised to take them out to play again during the next Mid-Autumn festival. After returning to the East Palace, Susu took the things she bought tonight to find Chu Lingfeng. Chengzi saw Susu running out instead of taking a bath, so she chased after her. "Susu, where are you going?" Susu said seriously, "I'm going to find Xiaoqiao and give him a gift." Chengzi smiled and said, "It's the same if I give it tomorrow." Susu said, "I want to give it now." Chengzi saw that Susu was so determined, so she agreed, "I'll take you there." Susu curved her eyebrows, grabbed Chengzi's hand and walked out. Arriving at Chu Lingfeng's door, Chengzi raised her hand and knocked on the door. Chu Lingfeng was about to rest, but when he heard the knock on the door, he walked over to open the door. When he saw Susu at the door, he was stunned. "Is there anything wrong, little princess?" Susu raised the small package in her hands with both hands and smiled sweetly, "I came to bring food to Xiaoqiao." Chengzi explained, "Prince Chu, the emperor took the young masters out of the palace to play tonight and bought some food and small toys outside the palace. The little princess can't wait to send it to you." Chu Lingfeng looked down at the things in her hand, a big bag bulging. Such a small person can actually carry so many things. "Thank you, little princess." Chu Lingfeng took the package from her hand. After Susu sent the things out, she smiled with dimples. "Xiaoqiao, good night." Chu Lingfeng said, "Well, good night, little princess." Chengzi took Susu out. Chu Lingfeng stood at the door, watching Susu's back as she left, until she disappeared in the night. He retracted his sight and looked down at the package in his hand, opened it, and found that there were all kinds of candies and cakes inside. There was also a dough figurine, which was squeezed and deformed because it was not placed properly, and it was impossible to see its original appearance. He carefully took the dough figurine out of it, feeling a little sorry, not knowing what kind of dough figurine Susu had chosen for him. Asterisk. Today was the happiest day for Su Qingqing in the past month. Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian walked back to the military residence slowly. The moon was high in the sky, stretching the shadows of the two people very long. The guard at the door saw the young lady coming back and immediately opened the door. Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian walked in. Su Changfeng saw his sister coming back from a distance, turned around and ran to the east wing. "Mother, Qingqing is back." The general's wife was excited and nervous when she learned that Mr. Jun was going to marry her daughter, fearing that the matter would fail. When she heard her son shouting, she left the house with the help of the nanny and went with her son to take a look. The wing where Jun Wuxian lived had been kept, and people disturbed him every day, for fear that he would suddenly visit and have a place to rest. No words along the way. When they reached the fork in the road, Su Qingqing suddenly stopped and said, "Mr. Jun, I have something to give you. Please wait here for a while." Su Qingqing turned around and ran to her own room without waiting for Jun Wuxian to speak. Jun Wuxian waved his folding fan and smiled at Su Qingqing, who was running all the way. After a while, Su Qingqing ran back. She panted a few times and handed the sachet she had embroidered these days to Jun Wuxian. Under the veil, she was full of shyness. "It's for you." Jun Wuxian could vaguely see that it was a sachet in her hand by the moonlight. He put away his folding fan, picked up the sachet with his slender fingers and handed it to his nose to smell it. The fragrance was very faint. Su Qingqing stared at Jun Wuxian without blinking, because Caixia said that her embroidery skills were not very good, and she was afraid that he would not like it, and she was also afraid that he would dislike it. Su Qingqing, who has always been confident, is always unconfident in front of Jun Wuxian. Jun Wuxian took the sachet and looked up at Su Qingqing, with a smile in his eyes. "Gifts are exchanged, I also have something to give you." Su Qingqing never thought that Jun Wuxian would give her something on this day, so she was very surprised and a little surprised. What are you going to give me? Jun Wuxian put the sachet Chu Ci into his arms, and then took out a beautiful and exquisite box from his sleeve pocket and handed it to her. For you. Then I'm welcome. Su Qingqing couldn't wait to take the exquisite box in his hand, opened it, and found that it was a hairpin, which emitted a gentle halo in the moonlight. The whole thing in front of her was seen by Chu Zhao and Caixia not far away. Caixia couldn't help but say, "My lady embroidered the sachet for more than a month, and her hands were pierced." Chu Zhao sighed, "What's that?" "My master even took out the betrothal gift." Babies, good night. Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 528. As soon as the words fell, both of them were stunned. Chu Zhao felt that he spoke too quickly. His master hadn't said anything yet, but he, a subordinate, said it first. Wouldn't it be bad? Caixia looked at Chu Zhao with a shocked face. "You mean, what Mr. Jun sent is a betrothal gift?" It's no wonder Caixia was so shocked. When Jun Wuxian was with the young lady, he never said a word that he liked the young lady or had a good impression of the young lady. If he did, with the temperament of his young lady, how could she not hide it from him? Chu Zhao touched his nose. "I guessed, everything depends on my master." Caixia. Also peeking were the worried general's wife and Su Changfeng, who was also worried. The general's wife looked at the two people giving each other gifts under the moon, subconsciously thinking that they were giving each other tokens of love, and her eyes were immediately filled with tears of excitement. She took out a handkerchief and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Her precious daughter could finally marry a good man. Su Changfeng felt a little unreal. Mr. Jun didn't say he would come to propose marriage next time before he left. Suddenly, they got together? Su Changfeng wanted to see what happened next, but the general's wife grabbed his ear and walked out. "Don't watch." Su Changfeng grimaced in pain and was forced to leave with his old and frail mother. On the way back, the general's wife began to nag, "You are not young anymore, it's time to get married." Su Changfeng almost jumped up when he heard this, but because of his old and frail mother, he endured it, fearing that he would anger her to death. "Mother, let's talk about it after my sister gets married. Look at the current situation, it won't be long before Qingqing gets married." The general's wife was neither happy nor unhappy when she thought of her daughter getting married. After taking a look at her youngest son, she said, "I'll arrange a blind date for you tomorrow." Su Changfeng didn't dare to disobey his mother, so he could only perfunctorily respond, "I'll listen to you." Asterisk. Su Qingqing stared at the hairpin in the box without blinking. She had never seen such a beautiful hairpin before. She carefully picked up the hairpin and held it in front of her eyes to examine it carefully. The hairpin was made of jade, and it felt cool to the touch, like mutton fat jade, but the color didn't look like mutton fat jade. There were two crabapple flowers on the hairpin, one large and one small, emitting a cold white halo. Su Qingqing, who had seen many rare treasures, couldn't guess what material the flowers were made of, which could emit a halo in the dark night. The hairpin was simple and generous. Su Qingqing's previous aesthetic was luxurious and ostentatious hairpins that could show status. She didn't like this simple and elegant hairpin. Now, as long as Jun Wuxian gave it to her, she liked it all. Su Qingqing raised her head happily and looked at Jun Wuxian. "I like it very much. Thank you for your gift." Jun Wuxian looked at Su Qingqing. After being together for so long, he still understood her better. She was a simple person. Whatever she thought in her heart would show on her face, which made her easy to suffer. "As long as you like it." Su Qingqing closed the lid of the gift box, and then held it in her arms with both hands, carefully, for fear of dropping it. "Then you rest first, I should go back to rest too. Jun Wuxian nodded, yes. After Su Qingqing turned around with the gift, the smile on her face could not be hidden, and she walked back to her room with a cheerful step. Jun Wuxian stood tall and watched the petite figure disappear in the corridor. Although he seemed calm on the surface, he was actually a little nervous in his heart, so he didn't say some words. But he felt that there was a long way to go, so there was no need to rush. Chu Zhao, who had been hiding in the dark, came out quickly after hearing the call. Master! Go check Shen Shui's background. Master, didn't you check Shen Shui's background? Why are you checking it again? Chu Zhao asked in confusion. When they checked it before, they didn't investigate it in depth. Jun Wuxian glanced at Chu Zhao coldly, go to the countryside to check, and check all the people who know Shen Shui again. I understand. Chu Zhao took the order and left quickly. Jun Wuxian recalled Susu and Dao Tao he met on the street, as if he saw Xiaju when he was a child, especially Susu, who looked exactly like Xiaju. Asterisk. Su Qingqing was so happy that she looked down at the gift box in her hand from time to time. She was more surprised than ever by Jun Wuxian's sudden appearance. Caixia looked at her young lady's walking posture, which was completely different from before during the day. She used to be careless and weak, but now she was full of energy and walked happily. Miss, you are very happy today. Su Qingqing grinned unabashedly, of course. Caixia thought of what Chu Zhao said just now, and couldn't help reminding, Miss, do you know that the gift that Mr. Jun gave you has a meaning? And it was on the day of Kikiao festival. Su Qingqing was stunned for a moment, looked down at the gift in her hand, and looked at Caixia in confusion. What is the meaning? Caixia saw that her young lady was not enlightened, so she boldly reminded, Miss, do you think it could be a token of love or a betrothal gift? Su Qingqing stopped and thought of what Jun Wuxian said on the day he left. On the Kikiao festival, boys and girls in their place would give each other tokens of love to express their love, but they were not in that kind of relationship. Jun Wuxian hadn't said that either, even just now, he didn't mention it at all. Caixia continued, Miss, I heard Chu Zhao say that this is a betrothal gift, and I think it is 80% true. Su Qingqing's heartbeat suddenly became cheerful, and she was looking forward to it. She asked again uncertainly, did Chu Zhao really say that? Caixia nodded vigorously, it was indeed Chu Zhao who said that, but he also said that he guessed it, and I think it is probably true. After hearing what Caixia said, Su Qingqing lay on the bed and had no intention of sleeping. She was thinking that the hairpin might be a betrothal gift from Jun Wuxian. But Jun Wuxian didn't say a word. The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't sleep. This night was destined to be a sleepless night. The next morning, at the dining table. It is said that the more the mother-in-law sees her son-in-law, the more she likes him. This is absolutely true. The general's wife originally liked Jun Wuxian, no matter his appearance or temperament, she directly regarded him as a son-in-law, constantly reminding him to eat and asking about his well-being. Jun Wuxian was free and easy, and he was not particular about details. He responded calmly to the warm hospitality of the general's wife. Su Qingqing found that the atmosphere was a little wrong. She always felt that her mother and brother were looking at her. She raised her head and looked at her mother and brother opposite. When she looked over, the general's wife and Su Changfeng had already lowered their heads to continue breakfast. A trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. Did she think too much? After breakfast, Su Qingqing took Jun Wuxian to visit the garden. In fact, no matter how big the general's mansion is, she had already visited it when she stayed there for a few days last time. Now she was just visiting it again. But her mood was roughly the same, probably because of the person next to her. In the past, Su Qingqing had a bad temper, liked to argue with people, and liked to show off. Now, she seems to have become more mature with age. Unconsciously, they came to the pavilion next to the lotus pond. It was very cool here because of the shade. Su Qingqing stood in front of the railing and gently waved the round fan in her hand. Jun Wuxian stood beside Su Qingqing, looking at the scenery in the lake. Before leaving, the pond was full of lotus flowers in summer, but now the lotus flowers are gone and autumn is coming soon. He lowered his eyes and looked at her. Qingqing. Su Qingqing raised her head and looked at Jun Wuxian. She found that he had changed his name for her. He had never called her Qingqing before, but now he changed his name and she was a little uncomfortable. Jun Wuxian's eyes fell on the veil on her cheek. He had never seen her like this since her cheek was injured. He put away the folding fan and stretched out his slender fingers to her ear. Su Qingqing didn't know what he wanted to do, but just looked at him in confusion. It wasn't until the hand touched her earlobe that she realized that Jun Wuxian wanted to take off her veil. She instinctively grabbed the hand and looked at him with a panicked look. "It doesn't look good." Jun Wuxian said softly, "What have I not seen about you?" "Just a few scars." Su Qingqing held the hand tightly, lowered her eyes and looked at the folding fan in his hand, and said faintly, "I would be disgusted if I saw it myself, so you'd better not look at it." Jun Wuxian recalled that when she was just disfigured, she was depressed all day long. She said that the most important things for a woman are appearance and chastity. He regretted not saving her earlier, otherwise she wouldn't have experienced this. "That's because you value your appearance too much, so you are unwilling to accept its existence. In my eyes, you are no different now than you were before." Su Qingqing was stunned when she heard this, and then she thought that he was comforting her. She smiled and said, "You used to say that I was too old to get married, and now you have learned to comfort me with words. How could it be the same before and now?" When Jun Wuxian mentioned this, he was stunned for a moment. "Did I say this?" Su Qingqing emphasized her tone and said, "Of course I did." Jun Wuxian also tried to recall it. After being with Su Qingqing for more than 3 years, he was shocked to realize that he often broke into the palace at night and went to Yuxiang Palace. Maybe he really said this. People always change. Su Qingqing deeply understood the sentence, and she nodded in agreement. People do change. Now I can reflect on myself and how stupid I was before. Jun Wuxian became interested when he heard this. "Why do you say that?" In the past, because she saw the prince's unparalleled handsome appearance, she insisted on entering the palace despite her mother's opposition, and learned to use all means to win favor. Relying on the power of her mother's family, she is arrogant and domineering, and doesn't take anyone seriously. If she is not stupid, what is she? However, after she became good friends with Shen Shuwei, she no longer wanted to compete for favor, and she also found that she could live freely and comfortably without competing for favor. She also met Jun Wuxian at that time. At that time, Jun Wuxian always appeared in night clothes, revealing only a pair of eyes. Let's not talk about it, it's all black history, so she won't tell Jun Wuxian. Jun Wuxian chuckled when he heard it, and while she was not paying attention, he lifted the veil, and the light veil fell, revealing the cheek that had not been seen for a long time. The scar on the cheek was clearly visible. Su Qingqing was stunned at first, and then she covered her face with both hands, fearing that he would see it. She stared at Jun Wuxian angrily and annoyed. "How can you do this?" Jun Wuxian looked at her actions and chuckled. "Are you going to live with your face covered in front of me for the rest of your life? Good afternoon. Ask for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 529. Su Qingqing was stunned when she heard this. She looked up at Jun Wuxian in disbelief. She wanted to ask him what he meant by spending the rest of his life together. But she was afraid that she might have misunderstood him. Maybe he meant to be friends for life. Although she had given up the idea a long time ago, she still had some expectations in her heart. She asked timidly, "What do you mean by this sentence?" Jun Wuxian still smiled, "It means literally." Su Qingqing was a little annoyed. "There are many literal meanings. Who knows what you mean? Don't cover it." "I don't mind." "Why do you mind?" Jun Wuxian pulled her hand off her face, revealing her fair cheek again. There were 2 scars on each side of her cheek, one deep and one shallow. His fingers touched her cheek, and his fingertips could clearly feel the unevenness of the scars. What women care about most is their faces. Especially in front of the person they like, how can they say they don't mind? Su Qingqing tried to cover her face, but was stopped by Jun Wuxian. She was a little annoyed. "Don't look at it, you will have a nightmare." Su Qingqing often had nightmares because of her face, and she didn't want Jun Wuxian to have a nightmare because of seeing her face. Jun Wuxian couldn't help laughing. "Why do you have a nightmare?" Su Qingqing said, "I'm scared." Jun Wuxian smiled and said, "I'm braver than you, I won't be afraid or have a nightmare." Su Qingqing felt that she was brainwashed by Jun Wuxian, and she was dizzy. There was a sentence in the book that was absolutely right: beauty misleads people. Jun Wuxian said one sentence at a time, "In the future, you don't need to wear a veil in front of me." Su Qingqing couldn't refuse Jun Wuxian, but when she thought of the scar on her face, she was still a little hesitant. Not good. Jun Wuxian's eyes fell on the scar on her cheek, leaned over and kissed the scar. He had never been close to a woman, but he didn't reject close contact with her. Just like that night, Su Qingqing found out when she kissed him secretly. Not only did they kiss secretly that night, but they also had close contact during their previous relationship, but it was just physical contact. He didn't like to meddle in other people's business, but he meddled in Su Qingqing's business. The kiss was like a dragonfly touching the water, but it stirred up thousands of waves in Su Qingqing's heart, and it couldn't be calmed for a long time. "Jun Wuxian kissed me?" Although it was just on the face. She looked at Jun Wuxian with wide eyes. "Why did you kiss me, and accept my face?" Jun Wuxian chuckled, "You even accepted my betrothal gift, so it's legitimate to kiss you." "Brothel gift?" Su Qingqing quickly thought of the hairpin she gave me last night. It turned out to be a betrothal gift. Her eyes opened wider than before, and she still couldn't believe it was true. "Didn't you say you wouldn't marry an ugly freak? Then you still gave me a betrothal gift, which means you want to marry me." Ugly freak, she didn't say these 5 words, because she didn't want to be an ugly freak either. Jun Wuxian tapped her forehead with a folding fan. "I said I won't marry an ugly woman, are you ugly?" Su Qingqing was stunned again. She thought Jun Wuxian said he didn't mind to comfort her, but it turned out he really didn't mind. Why did she feel like she was dreaming? The plot in the storybook happened to her? Then why didn't you say it was a betrothal gift when you gave it to her last night? Jun Wuxian said, "It was too abrupt, I was afraid I would scare you." Giving a betrothal gift may be a little abrupt, but it was not an impulse. Su Qingqing thought of the hairpin and knew it was a treasure at first glance, but she didn't know much about treasures. Now it seems that the hairpin is more valuable than she thought. She was really shocked by Jun Wuxian's sudden betrothal gift, and she was naturally happy. "Then why did you suddenly send me a betrothal gift?" Jun Wuxian smiled and asked back, "Then why did you kiss me secretly?" Su Qingqing was stunned at first. He actually knew that she kissed him secretly that night. Her little face flushed red, like a ripe apple, red and plump. "You know everything." His voice was thin and weak, so embarrassed. Jun Wuxian looked at her leisurely. "Yeah. Su Qingqing only realized now that Jun Wuxian was really a bit bad. He pretended not to know even though he knew she liked him. Then you pretended not to know at that time, deliberately making fun of me. You are wronging me. I didn't mention it because I was afraid you would be embarrassed. Jun Wuxian paused here. I should have given you a token of love, but your age is there, it's better to send you a betrothal gift directly to save some time. Originally, sending a betrothal gift should be a happy thing, but Su Qingqing always felt that Jun Wuxian was finding ways to say that she was old. She was about to turn 20 years old. When other women were this old, they would have become mothers and had 2 or 3 children. For example, Shen Shuwei is already a mother of 2 children, and her baby is almost 2 years old. Su Qingqing looked up at the man in front of her. After struggling for a long time, she finally plucked up the courage to ask, "You are willing to marry me, does it mean that you like me?" She thought that if Jun Wuxian only married her to fulfill his promise on the street tonight, she would be a little unwilling. A marriage of unrequited love is too tiring. She wanted to be like the relationship between the prince and the princess, which was enviable. Jun Wuxian sat down with his skirt, and took her to sit down, shaking the folding fan in his hand. Su Qingqing glanced at Jun Wuxian anxiously. She also knew that she was greedy. She still asked for so much even though it was like this, and in front of the person she liked. But she still yearned for a love of 2 people for a lifetime. Jun Wuxian looked at her steadily. "Do you think I'm the kind of person who would marry a woman he doesn't like?" Su Qingqing looked up at him happily. "That means I like her, right?" Jun Wuxian nodded. "Yeah." Su Qingqing asked again, "Will you marry 3 wives and 4 concubines?" Jun Wuxian said faintly, "Having one woman is troublesome enough, how can I have the heart to marry so many?" Su Qingqing. "Is it really okay for you to say that?" Jun Wuxian smiled faintly. "Do you know how old I am this year?" Su Qingqing shook her head. "You never mentioned it, how can I know?" She looked at Jun Wuxian carefully and guessed, "About 26 years old." Jun Wuxian said, "I'm already 30 years old." Su Qingqing opened her eyes wide when she heard it, perhaps because she knew that Jun Wuxian also liked her, she was less considerate when she spoke. "You are 11 years older than me. You are an old cow eating young grass. Do you think I am too old?" Jun Wuxian looked at Su Qingqing's coquettish look, which was somewhat cute. He coughed lightly. "I only thought about getting married recently. Otherwise, I should have become a father at my age." Su Qingqing felt that what he said made sense. A handsome man like Jun Wuxian would not worry about not being able to marry a daughter of a famous family. She picked up a big bargain. It is said that uncles are caring. She secretly glanced at Jun Wuxian, and she didn't know if it was true. Jun Wuxian looked at her with a smile. "Why? Do you feel that you have lost?" Su Qingqing shook her head, and then said very seriously, "If you can be a couple for a lifetime, I will not lose." Jun Wuxian stared at her for a while, and realized that the reason why he treated her differently should be because of the anger when he saw her being kidnapped and bullied by other men. It was enough for him to understand this. When he gave her the induction goo, he didn't find any difference. "I find it troublesome." Su Qingqing, "You don't find me troublesome too?" Jun Wuxian smiled faintly, "A little, but it's not troublesome to deal with one." Su Qingqing felt comforted by his words. She tightly held the round fan in her hand, feeling a little unreal, like she was dreaming. Jun Wuxian said he wanted to marry her, and said he wanted to be with her for the rest of his life. She couldn't help but ask again, "Are you really going to marry me?" Jun Wuxian stared at her for a few seconds, then stretched out his arms to embrace her in his arms, gently shaking the folding fan in his hand. "The betrothal gift has been given, how can it be a joke?" Su Qingqing was sure that Jun Wuxian really wanted to marry her. After her disfigurement, she still couldn't believe that there would be someone who really didn't care about these things. She stared at Jun Wuxian, but he hit her forehead with a folding fan. "What are you looking at?" Su Qingqing blurted out subconsciously, "I'm wondering, when will we get married?" Jun Wuxian said, "Wait a little longer. If there is no news about Xiaju this time, I will propose to the general and choose a day to get married." Su Qingqing nodded in agreement. She also wanted Jun Wuxian to find her sister as soon as possible, so that he would settle down. This scene happened to be seen by Su Changfeng. He touched his chin and was a little dissatisfied. In broad daylight, hugging and kissing, how could it be? Before the blind date, I had always hoped that my sister would fall in love with someone and then get married. Now that she has finally found a good man, I am reluctant to let my sister get married. At this time, the scene Miao tribe. Shen Chuwei has seen Xiao Jinyan walking more and more smoothly in the past few days. In a few days, he will be able to walk freely like a normal person. She touched her chin and thought about how to coax him to follow her back. The difficulty coefficient is a bit high. Lin Xian was thirsty after exercising for a while, so he came to the table, picked up the teapot, poured himself a cup of tea, and drank it. Seeing Shen Chuwei staring at him, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" Shen Chuwei blinked her beautiful eyes twice and said sincerely, "You will be able to walk freely in a few days. Come with me. I will treat you well." Lin Xian was drinking tea and spat it out when he heard it. Seeing this, Shen Chuwei took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of his mouth for him. "Be careful, it will be very uncomfortable if you choke." Lin Xian felt a little uncomfortable in his throat. He looked up at Shen Chuwei. "Are you coaxing a child?" Shen Chuwei smiled awkwardly. "I'm telling the truth. As long as you come with me, I will really treat you well." Lin Xian stared at her for a while. In addition to the mole at the root of the thigh, there were two other moles that matched. What a coincidence. "I won't go back to Daxia with you until the matter is resolved." Shen Chuwei was a little helpless. She didn't know what was wrong with Xiao Jinyan's memory. Sometimes it was Lin Xian and sometimes it was Xiao Jinyan. She compromised. "Then you can always ask me to follow you, right?" Lin Xian looked at her harmless little face and smiled gently. "It's not impossible for you to take me with you, but..." Shen Chuwei asked, "But what?" "Good night." Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 530. Lin Xian stared at Shen Chuwei for a long time, seeing her expectant look and the tone of coaxing a child just now. "Why do you want to follow me?" Shen Chuwei sighed helplessly. "If you were not my husband, I would not have to follow you. The journey to Nanzhao is long, and it is inconvenient to eat and drink. How can it be as comfortable as lying at home?" Lin Xian actually felt that what she said made some sense. She took care of him at the beginning because he looked like her husband. Now she followed him because she believed that he was her husband. "If you want to follow, you must listen to me. Can you do it?" Shen Chuwei breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought it was some world problem, that's it?" Lin Xian stared at her, and she always burst out words that he couldn't understand, such as "What is the world problem? You are the prince, and now my husband. If I don't listen to you, who else can I listen to?" Lin Xian asked back, "Aren't you afraid that I will make you do something bad? Or that I will do something bad to you?" Shen Chuwei said firmly, "You won't." Lin Xian. Shen Chuwei suddenly came over, hugged his neck, and asked mysteriously, "When do you plan to go to Nanzhao Kingdom? Leave openly? Or sneak away?" Lin Xian suddenly felt very hot. The summer clothes were thin, and his arms could clearly feel the soft touch. He pursed his lips with dry mouth. Shen Chuwei has been staying here these days, saying that the masked man will hurt him, so that he spends every night in torment. The masked man did not appear, not knowing whether it was because she was there or for other reasons. He took a few sips of tea and asked after relieving his dry mouth, "Why do you ask that?" Shen Shuwei rested her chin on his shoulder. She used to do this often before, so she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. "I feel that Wang Leiwen has feelings for you. She is overbearing and tyrannical. At first, she wanted to buy our snowballs with money, but I refused. If I didn't sell them, she would snatch them away. I saw her trying to snatch our snowballs twice. If you leave, I'm afraid she won't let you go easily." Lin Xian raised his eyebrows. "Are you jealous?" Shen Shuwei answered seriously, "This is not called jealousy." Lin Xian looked at her with a smile. "What is it called?" "I'm afraid of trouble." "What do you think?" Shen Shuwei threw the question to him directly, wanting to hear what he said. Lin Xian said, "Of course I left openly. If she couldn't bear to let me go, she couldn't force me to leave." Shen Shuwei nodded in agreement. "My husband, what you said makes sense." Then she stared at him seriously, "But you can't leave me alone and run away." Lin Xian drank tea and glanced at Shen Shuwei, who was close at hand. "I have some doubts that your husband was entangled with you in this way, and then he couldn't get rid of you, so he married you." Shen Shuwei snorted, "No." Lin Xian asked, "Did your husband take the initiative to marry you?" Shen Shuwei thought that he didn't remember, so she explained her original intention in a concise manner. She shrugged, "I just wanted to eat and drink for free. Being the crown princess was purely an accident. It can be regarded as a pleasant surprise." Lin Xian looked at Shen Shuwei thoughtfully, not doubting the truth of her words, but finding it a little incredible. An unfavored concubine, who was locked up in a remote courtyard, could actually turn over and be favored? Others rely on tricks to regain favor. That night, Shen Shuwei came to Xiao Jinyan's guest room as usual. As soon as she entered, she heard the sound of fighting. Thinking that it might be the masked man, she ran in quickly and saw 3 people fighting in the room. One of them was the masked man. Even though she didn't know the moves, she could see that Xiao Jinyan and Qin Xiao were at a disadvantage, and the masked man was very skilled in martial arts. Xiao Jinyan's legs had only recovered not long ago. How could he withstand such a fierce fight? When she was about to rush over with the medicine box in her arms, she thought of her own strength and was no match for the masked man. She took out the medicine powder from the space and rushed over. While rushing over, she saw the masked man's palm hitting Xiao Jinyan's chest. The wound on his chest had just healed not long ago. How could he withstand the masked man's powerful palm? She didn't even have time to think, so she rushed towards Xiao Jinyan, hugged him and tried to avoid the masked man's palm, while sprinkling the medicine powder in her hand at the masked man. All this happened in just a moment. Shen Shuwei fell to the ground holding Xiao Jinyan due to inertia. The masked man saw Shen Shuwei suddenly appear, and saw the palm wind hit her back. He retracted his hand abruptly, and was hit by the backlash of his internal force, almost making him retreat several steps. However, he stood there straight, enduring the internal injuries caused by the backlash of his internal force. Things happened too quickly, and Lin Xian was not sure whether the masked man's palm hit Shen Shuwei. He looked her up and down hurriedly. "Are you okay?" This was the second time that Shen Shuwei rushed to save him regardless of anything, which shocked him greatly. Shen Shuwei fell down and hit the ground just now. Her knees hurt a little, but she didn't care about the pain and shook her head at him. "I'm fine." Lin Xian breathed a sigh of relief and looked up at the masked man. He saw him standing there straight, with a cold and evil look as if he came from the Shura of hell, without any emotion. But the palm just now clearly hit Shen Shuwei. Why did he retract it? As a martial artist, I know too well the consequences of the backlash of my internal energy, which can be more serious than the injury caused by hitting that person. Shen Shuwei helped Xiao Jinyan stand up, turned her head and looked at the masked man. She asked indignantly, What kind of deep hatred do you have with him that you must kill him? The masked man looked at the two people in front of him, and his eyes fell on Shen Shui's arm around Xiao Jinyan. He pursed his lips tightly and turned away without saying a word. He disappeared at the door in the blink of an eye. Shen Shui felt that the masked man had no manners at all, and then thought that he was a killer without emotions, so it was normal for him to be rude. Qin Xiao was relieved when he saw the masked man leave. The man was very skilled in martial arts, and they were no match for him at all. After the man left, he began to clean up the mess and then left. Shen Shui looked at Xiao Jinyan worriedly, fearing that he would be injured more. Are you injured anywhere? Let me take your pulse. Lin Xian shook his head, I'm fine. Shen Shui came not long after the masked man came. What is puzzling is that after Shen Shui came, the masked man not only stopped but also left. I don't know if I think Shen Shui's martial arts is better than the masked man. Qin Xiao left after cleaning up, leaving only Shen Shui and Xiao Jinyan in the room. Shen Shui reminded, go to the bed, I'll check you, so I can feel at ease. Lin Xian did not refuse, yes. Shen Shui put the medicine box on the bedside and opened it, taking out the medicine and tools to be used later. Lin Xian lay down on the bed. After the fight just now, he knew that the sensitivity of his legs had not recovered to that of a normal person, which also explained Shen Shui's inference that he needed to recuperate for a few more days. Shen Shui checked his body from top to bottom, and opened his clothes to reveal his perfect figure. Lin Xian is used to undressing in front of Shen Shui. He looked at Shen Shui, who was carefully checking the wound, more seriously than ever before. Is your family a family of medical students? How did you get the opportunity to enter the palace? Shen Shui raised her head and smiled at him, no, I am self-taught. Lin Xian chuckled, you are quite arrogant. Shen Shui shrugged indifferently, just think of me as bragging, I don't make a living by medical skills anyway. Lin Xian laughed again, as the crown princess, I really don't need to make a living by medical skills. You are right. Shen Shui looked at the scar on his chest. With her medicine, the scab did not crack and it would heal in a short time. After treating the wound, Shen Shui took his pulse again and confirmed that he had no internal injuries. The internal injuries he suffered last time were almost healed. She was relieved. After Shen Shui packed up the medicine box, she came to the bed, took off her shoes and went to bed. Lin Xian watched this scene every day in the past few days. Every time he watched it, he had only one thought in his mind, that is, don't think about sleeping tonight. Lin Xian sighed helplessly and lay flat on the bed, thinking about how to ignore the fact that there was a woman sleeping next to him and not think about it. After Shen Shui lay down, she hugged his arm sideways. Lin Xian wanted to pull back, but she hugged him tightly, and they inevitably touched each other. Shen Shui raised her head and looked at him, husband, I have a question for you. Lin Xian didn't want to bother about the title of husband anymore, so he let her go. Ask. Shen Shui asked seriously, you won't marry Wang Leiwen just because he saved your life, right? Lin Xian snorted, that's what you women think. It's not Shen Shui's fault for preparing for a rainy day. Who made him forget? She could trust Xiao Jinyan, but she couldn't trust the Lin Xian in front of her. What would you do if Wang Leiwen asked to marry you? Lin Xian said lightly, why worry about something that didn't happen? Seeing that he didn't answer, Shen Shui simply turned over and lay on him, looking down at him from above. Because you don't remember, I have to remind you that I don't share a husband with others. Lin Xian laughed softly, your husband is the prince, the future crown prince, how could you be the only woman? Sure enough, after forgetting, the idea changed, although it was the real situation. Although there are several women in the East Palace, you have only had me from beginning to end, and never slept with them. Lin Xian seemed a little unbelievable, is everything you said true? Shen Shuwei was afraid that he would not believe her, so she nodded vigorously, "Of course it is true, there is no need to lie for this. So, if you don't remember, I want to remind you that although my medical skills are okay, I can't develop a regret medicine." Lin Xian was indeed shocked after hearing this. The prince was so devoted. No wonder she came all the way to find her husband, and no wonder she would save him regardless of her own danger. Good afternoon. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.